I'd like to welcome everyone along to the Plan Applications Committee, Tuesday, 23rd of February 2016. And could I ask that all mobile phones are switched off? And just like to note that this meeting may be recorded and subsequently made available to the public for listening purposes. Gillian, could you do the SEDERUNT, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have 18 members present this morning, so we are quorate, and we have an apology from Councillor John Syme. Thank you.
Gillian. Patsy.
Councillor Hislop, an apology.
Have we got any declarations of interest? Ian.
Yeah, I do, Chair. Thanks. Item 14, the reasons I called that one in are given within the terms of the report, but I intend to withdraw that, given the applicant is known to me.
Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Declare an interest in item 8 due to a business relationship with one of the objectors.
Anyone else? Nope. Could we confirm the minutes of the previous meeting? Agreed. Gillian, could you outline the procedures to be followed?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the Planning Applications Committee will consider each application in turn as detailed on the agenda. The case officer or other appointed officer will make a short presentation addressing the determining issues accompanied by digital images. Any late information, amendments or corrections will be reported at this time. Members may ask questions of officers following the presentation on points of clarification. The Chairman has been provided with a list of eligible representatives who have registered to speak at this meeting within the period specified in Council policy. No other persons will be allowed to speak. The Chairman will individually invite those who have registered in advance to speak to make their presentation, after which they may be questioned by committee members. No questions may be asked of members. The order of eligible parties being heard will be as follows: third parties objecting to an application, third parties supporting an application, statutory consultees objecting to an application, elected members of Dumfries and Galloway Council who are not members of the Planning Applications Committee, and then the applicant or their agent. Representatives have been placed in alphabetical order, and a copy of the public speaking list is available from the committee officer taking notes of our proceedings today. Presentations will be strictly limited to 3 minutes per person, except for national and major developments, which by their very nature are more complex, where the time limit will be 5 minutes. The Chairman of the committee will ask you to come to a conclusion if you take too long. Representatives are encouraged to use the time allocated to clarify any points they consider material and address the determining issues. Certain matters are not normally material planning considerations and will not be taken into account by the Council when deciding on the planning application. Representatives should not raise any new matters without explaining why they were not raised earlier with the case officer. Please do not repeat what is in the report, as members will have already read the report. After all the representations have been heard, the meeting is then in formal session, and no members of the public may address the committee from the public gallery. The Planning Applications Committee will then proceed to determine the application. Thank you.
Gillian.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just in relation to item 4, just to make everybody present today, the members of the public and the committee members, that the applicant's solicitor actually lodged a deemed refusal appeal with the Scottish ministers. This action means that the application is now removed from Dumfries and Galloway Council as planning authority, and it will now be determined by a reporter from the Scottish Government's Directorate of Planning and Environmental Appeals instead. Therefore, it will not call today. I'll let Mr. Suddy speak on an operational matter in relation to item 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Perhaps uniquely in my experience, this was a case where an appeal on deemed refusal, in other words, non-determination, was actually lodged just at the same time as the report was completed for going to committee 11 days after the appeal was lodged. This puts us in a very unusual position because normally when and if a deemed refusal comes in, I can't recall, Robert can't either, any wind farm one where that's happened, but normally the timescales are tight, so tight that the case officers just have to deal with that deemed refusal appeal as an operational matter. But as I say, fairly uniquely, you have a report before you. And whilst obviously the committee can't determine the application, it would be of assistance to officers who will be dealing with this appeal just to hear from members if they would be satisfied for us to put forward the report as the council's case in the case of this appeal.
Members? David?
Well, Chair, I think given the officers have gone to the trouble of making up a report for us and for it not to be heard, I think it's a bit of a liberty. I would certainly support it being sent up to the reporter in support of the application.
David? Ian?
Actually, my question, it's unique as David you said, I've never come across this before either in the short time I've been in member of the Planning Application Committee, but just in regards to the legal technicalities behind that, I don't know how that applies. We've got a report, I would imagine, as the council would submit their case, but a deemed refusal, I'm not exactly clear on the process for that anyway, so just if we get further information in regards to that, Chairman.
David?
Yes, that's right. The appellant, as they now are, have to submit a case to the Scottish ministers, which Robert's team have received. Now, we have a very short timescale in which to actually respond to that. Normally, with a deemed refusal, there are things that are missing. There are consultation responses that haven't yet been received. A report hasn't been concluded. Very unusually, here you actually have everything, which really effectively, I'm suggesting, would be the basis of the submission of the case to the reporters unit, provided members are agreeable to that. The only other thing that we would submit would be our response to their appeal statement.
Jim?
Is there a case, David, where the applicant knew we were going to recommend refusal and took an opportunity here, or have we just simply failed to conduct the process within the observed timescale?
In respect of Shennanton application, we actually had what's called a processing agreement, which removes applications from the normal 4-month determination period, and unless the processing agreement is breached in some way, then the right of appeal to the Scottish ministers doesn't exist. In this particular instance, we had the processing agreement. It is particularly irritating on our part that the applicant actually sought an extension to the processing agreement from the council. That was agreed. They then actually breached that themselves. We aimed to have this to meet the processing agreement to come to the January meeting. Unfortunately, the applicants also are the applicants for Larbrax Wind Farm, and they submitted an appeal on that one, which meant that the case officer had to prioritise doing the appeal case rather than this report, so it had to go to February. So all of that resulted in the fact that the window of opportunity for an appeal came in after the end of January, and that's what they did. So it's not really a failing on our part so much as the fact that I think they probably will have also looked at the consultation responses, a very clear response from the landscape architect in particular, and whilst it's pure speculation, there is certainly, I think, a feeling amongst officers that this is them just trying to cut to the chase and get to a decision faster via the Scottish ministers.
Ian?
I was just to be absolutely clear, David, you're basically saying that it's up to this committee to decide whether this report goes as part of your submission to Scottish ministers.
Not really, because of the timescales. Normally, a deemed refusal appeal will be an operational matter. And in any other case that I've dealt with, we've never had a report on an agenda, which has been in the public domain like this. It would be of assistance to officers who are going to have to respond to this, to actually be able to say that this is the view of the planning authority, and therefore it's got more weight. It's not just an officer opinion, it has got some member backing to it as well. But it would be open, arguably, to the council, because of this particular circumstance, to say that you don't wish to actually contest the appeal. which would be very unusual and potentially could leave the council open to a award of expenses for being unreasonable. But especially when you've got an officer report before you, which I think is, it's very detailed. It should act as the council's case unless members feel very strongly to the contrary.
Andy?
Thanks, Chair. I'm looking for a wee bit of advice here because I understand the rationale behind this, and David's saying this isn't a normal run-of-the-mill thing here, but I'd be a wee bit frightened it was unsafe to actually take a paper that hasn't been discussed and we haven't heard the objectors or the supporters for us to make a decision or to make some recommendation. And I actually think that's potentially an unsafe position for us to be in, and I'd welcome some advice from the solicitor on that.
Thank you. In relation to the appeal, it's normally the response in relation to any appeal submitted to the DPEA is on officers to put forward the submission on behalf of the council, and that happens whether they're refused at committee. Against officer recommendation, it would fall to myself to prepare. If it's a refusal that the planning officer has recommended, then it would be on the planning officer to submit the response on behalf of the council. So in relation to the report, I don't think we've ever had a situation where the report has simply been submitted as a submission for the council. And I don't know, perhaps I've picked up on this wrong, but I don't think this was going to form the actual submission for the council.
Yes, should make that clear. I mean, basically, members are not being asked to make a decision on this because you can't make a decision on it. It's over to the DPA, the reporter, who would actually make the decision on this. What I'm suggesting to members is that we have to submit the council's case in response to the appeal statement that's been made. And because we have so much information contained within the report, it's something that we can submit to the DPA for them to actually consider. But just to be clear, members are not making a decision on an application today. You can't. It's taken out with your hands. I should also add that whilst it's the practice of the council to actually hear representations before applications come before the Planning Applications Committee, there's no statutory requirement to do that. That some planning authorities determine applications without hearing representations from either party.
Yeah, Alistair.
Well, I'm reassured, having had the clarification, so because under no circumstances would I have been of the view, in fact, that we consider this today on a substantive basis. That to me would be wholly inappropriate. As far as I'm concerned, Chair, this is an operational matter, and I say that with a certain degree of relish, having listened as an elected member over the years, to, well, not in a planning context necessarily, but in various other contexts, but elected members in their relationship with operational matters. If, in fact, the planning officials of this council feel, in fact, that submission is appropriate for them to make, as it were, on behalf of the council, that is a matter for them, and it's nothing to do with me or any other of the 47 elected members, Chair. One other point I would make, sir, if I understood David correctly, he was saying, in fact, that the applicants may, in fact, have failed to adhere to an undertaking which they gave in relation to an extension. While, again, that's an operational matter and it's not for me to instruct anyone, sir, I would like to think that that situation, unpalatable as it is, should be founded upon, if at all possible. And that's not an instruction, it's merely an observation for obvious reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I can put members' minds at rest, that point has already been raised with the DPA.
Thanks, Chairman. I mean, I agree with Alice. I have to listen to what people are saying, taking the advice that David's already given us, but I would feel uneasy about, in real terms, ratifying what's here today without going through a process we would normally went through. But I feel comfortable if, operationally, if the officers feel that they want to submit it as part of the evidence, then I feel comfortable at that. Going back to what Alice was saying, is that I think it is an operational issue, but comfortable as a member of this committee that it's used in as supporting evidence.
Tom?
Thanks, Chairman. I think Alistair covered most of what I was going to say, and I'm quite happy to go ahead on that basis. And I think, as was rightfully pointed out, because some of us did go and visit other authorities, we're one of the few authorities that actually allow both representatives and objectors to speak to us. We're also one of the few authorities who actually has a public vote. Other authorities do it by a show of hands, which has proven to be quite corrupt at times, because it's quite easy to manipulate. So we're a lot more democratic and open and transparent than most other planning authorities. And I think Alistair was in one or two of the visits with me as well, we went to see how other folk operate. So I'm more than happy to go along that road.
James?
Thank you. Let's just get on with it. I think we're all agreed.
Jim? Decision.
Thanks, Chair. We have in front of us a very extensive report, which no doubt has consumed hours of officers' time. It would seem foolish to put in a submission which would largely duplicate the work which has already been done. It would be sensible, surely, to submit the report as it stands.
Members agreed?
Yeah, I'd be happy enough to submit if it's an operational matter, submit the report by all means in terms of information from the council, but when it comes to the recommendation, I don't really see why that should be there. So the recommendation wouldn't be taken, it would just be the report in itself.
Right, David?
Yes, just to be clear, all I'm seeking is that you can't make a decision. That's very, very clear. But if members had felt very strongly that we should not be contesting this appeal, this was your opportunity to do so. Otherwise, we will proceed on an operational basis. I'm quite happy with it.
Members agreed? Now we go on to item 5 in the agenda, CORSE, DUCHRAE Farm, DALRY, 15/B/2/00269 for an erection of a 70-metre high anemometer mast with 3.5 wind vane for a temporary period of 3 years retrospective. And we've got Robert Duncan speaking on this. Robert?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just start by presenting the slides and summarising the report. First slide shows the application site with the red arrow demarking where the mast is. You'll note from the report, looking at the planning history at 1.5 and 1.6, there have been 2 previous planning applications, the most recent of which, 13P2135, expired last year. The mast is still in situ, as we'll see in the pictures, so this is a retrospective planning application because the mast does not have planning permission at the moment, and this is a point that's been made by several of the representatives. You'll just see at the northern part of the location plan here, Lockerbie Reservoir, and you've got the public road just to the left-hand side. This is an elevational drawing of the Met mast, fairly standard type with guy wires, with bird diverters also in situ along those guy wires with anchor points surrounding a central mast. This is a view of the proposed site. I'm not sure if you can make it out on the screen at the back of the room, but you can just see the Met mast at the location there on the hill. This is on the road going north, roughly towards Lockerbie Reservoir in the distance. The next slide is just further north along that road, and it's looking more towards the kind of east-northeast direction. You can see the mast on the horizon at that location. The stated purpose of the mast has been provided in the report at 4.3. The question really is, in this case, there have been 2 previous temporary planning permissions granted at this location, the last of which expired. So as I've made clear, it has been in situ at this location for the last 7 or 8 months or so. The question is whether or not to grant it a further temporary permission. And in that respect, I feel that it is appropriate, given the changing circumstances at this location, but to only give it permission for a temporary period of 18 months, recognising the intervening period of 6 months or so that it's been there without permission, and the planning history and the data that's been cumulatively logged over that period of time. Members will note at 4.6, there's a red aviation light, conventional visible light at the moment, and in common with what is good practice now and within our LDP, and recognising the proximity of the site to the boundary of the buffer area of the Galloway Forest Dark Sky Park, it's recommended that that should be changed to an infrared aviation light to benefit visual amenity. And that's recommended as one of 4 conditions in the recommendation. Happy to answer any questions arising at this stage, Chair.
Members, points of clarification. David?
Given the applicant's not here, can you explain exactly what information they're looking for now that they haven't been able to get in the last 6 years? I find it strange. I'm certainly not happy with this at all, the way that the applicant has just pleased himself what he's done. But if you could give us an idea of what they're trying to find out that they couldn't find out in the last 6 years.
The information I have to hand is presented in the report at 1.7. That's what I have been provided with by the applicant, so I can't really clarify beyond what I've been provided with, and that's presented in the report there.
Thanks.
Anyone else? David? Nope. Could we have Alison Chapman, an objector, please? Alison, you've got 3 minutes. 3 minutes, and I'll let you know 30 seconds to go. And can we stick to the point? This is a plan application retrospective for a MAST, not to do with wind farms, etc.
This application is dated 23rd September 2015, when the anemometer to which it relates has been in place since it was installed on the 17th of June 2010. It is still there. When a further 2 years extension was granted on the 29th of July 2013, the anemometer should already have been taken down and the ground restored by the previous 17th of June. The officer in her report attached to the permission indicated that a further 2 years only would be considered acceptable. So this anemometer should have been taken down on or before the 17th of June last year to satisfy that condition. Why is it still standing more than half a year later? Why has this planning condition not been enforced? The committee report of 4.2 actually states that this temporary anemometer does not have the benefit of planning permission. Temporary means lasting for a limited time, but this anemometer has been in place since it was installed, nearly 6 years ago. Does temporary mean something different for planners? Our local development plan requires that development proposals should respect, protect, and/or enhance the region's rich landscape character, scenic qualities and features. They should also reflect the scale and local distinctiveness of the landscape. By remaining in situ, not just on one occasion, but twice, long after it should have been dismantled, shows, to my mind, very little respect for the region's rich landscape character or for its historical and cultural associations with the Gordon family and the adventures of young Lochinvar, whose crannog can still be seen on the nearby loch. The committee report is at pains to demonstrate that this so-called slimline mast hardly intrudes on the landscape, but by the same token, it doesn't exactly protect or enhance its character, scenic qualities or features, does it? Infrared lighting is now belatedly suggested, but we cannot forget that for 6 long years, a fixed aviation light has already intruded every night into the dark night skies over Lochinvar, with
30 seconds
unknown
to go.
impacts on local and wider environment. You stopping me? Right. Oh, sorry.
30 seconds to go.
This is the
I
last
said,
bit. It is surely time for councillors to insist that development proposals respect, protect, and/or enhance our region's rich landscape character. It is time to refuse any retrospective permission for this so-called temporary mast, which has been without planning permission for 6 months. The project is supported was comprehensively refused. Thank you.
Thank you. To remain in your seat, maybe questions. Any members got any questions? No. Thank you,
Okay,
Alison.
thank you.
Members, we're now in session.
Chair, I've got huge concerns about this one. I can remember actually at the time, given the extension, it was an extension they wanted for 3 years. Another 3 years to get some information about wind and the climate within that particular area. This is another application at a time when, you know, they've had 6 years of gathering information, and I don't know how much more information you can actually gather on these particular things. So I'm of the opinion that I'm not going to approve this particular thing, and I think it's actually contrary to OP1. As it does not respect, protect, or have any ability to the scale and density of the actual characteristics of the place that it's at. There is no trees in that area, as you've seen in the pictures. So therefore, I would look to actually refuse this, because we've already given them an extension. At that particular time, I think I was the one that moved it for 2 years rather than 3 years, and move on from there.
Alistair?
Well, my view, sir, my view, sir, is that Mr. Duncan has summed up the situation accurately and adequately in the report, and albeit with a certain degree of reluctance on my part, I would move, in fact, that the report, the application, be granted on the basis set out in Mr. Duncan's report.
Jane?
Thanks very much. It is a temporary structure. Clearly, people are, I think, pulling the wool over our eyes, and I think it's extremely tiresome when people don't take things down. But I can't go along, unfortunately, with Councillor Dryber on this. I don't think it would be reasonable to say no, bearing in mind that it is a temporary structure. But I wonder if the mover of the amendment, actually, I don't know if you're a motion or amendment yet, don't know if you've got a seconder, would be willing to restrict this to 1 year only, because there have been 6 years already. And it seems to me not unreasonable to suggest that we might remove it to 1 year only.
Thank you, Chairman. Over recent years, we have repeatedly reduced the period of these structures from 3 years to 2 years. In the report in 1.7, it says that there's been very useful data since 2010, but the reason given that wind farms have moved on during that time. But surely the data has not. The data is the same as it was collected since 2010, so the information should be there for the development of any. So I would certainly support Councillor Dryber.
I think we've got to remember the reason that it's being further, they need further information, it's in the report, is if there is a wind farm, it's a different formation as what they originally done. Right, Ian?
But the application for a mast that is in its current position, so it hasn't moved, it's not intending to move, the data should be there.
Why they want it, they want this to stay an extension on this. You want back in now?
Well, normally, sir, and I think my record would prove it, I normally in favour of, a compromise, an acceptable compromise, but I feel, that gets the deference to Councillor Maitland in this particular instance, that I would prefer to keep the amendment or motion, call it what you will, Chair, as per Mr. Duncan's report. So the answer would be no, I would not be prepared to reduce it from 18 months to 1 year. I think at the end of the day, Chair, that might be seen, because I have no doubt this will go to appeal, and without trying to second guess the outcome of any appeal, I suspect that may be seen in certain quarters as a step too far. So, my proposal stands, Chair.
David?
Thanks, Chair. At the present moment, I'm thinking about supporting Archie Driver. When would this period start? Would this, given it's retrospective, would it start from the previous application and continue? So the year would be almost up? Or would it start from the date of the application from today? And I think the company, that the applicant needs to be told that when you get decisions made like that, you've got to adhere to them. And they've, as far as I'm concerned, they've abused the planning committee and the planning department in Dumfries and Galloway Council. And that's really, as far as I'm concerned, that's not acceptable. They've got conditions to work to just the same as our departments have. But if you could advise me as to when the starting date would be, I'd be much obliged.
David?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd refer members to page 45 in condition 1. It says, on or before the expiry of a period of 18 months from the date of this permission. So it would run from the date that planning permission would be granted, which would be, normally it's a day or two after the planning committee.
Peter?
Thank you. I see this as a blatant disrespect of the planning authority's conditions as set out in 2013. And I think we've got to ask ourselves as a planning authority, if we're going to allow conditions to be ignored, where are we going to get ourselves into? And so I'm with Archie on this one. I'm willing to support second a motion if he's putting it forward to refuse this.
Ian?
Yeah, I don't know whether Councillor Maitland, in her seconding, would second for the terms of the report, but if not, I would support Councillor Geddes' proposal on the basis of the reasons and report that's given by the planning officer.
Thanks, Ian. Ronnie?
Chair, when Councillor Blake put his points forward, the raw data has been collected over 10 years, and it doesn't matter where the wind goes, or you put your wind turbines wherever, the data doesn't change. The thing it's however, the climate conditions have changed. If you take this winter, we've had 3, 4, 5, 6 storms, all with names, can't remember them all. You could say, well, hang on, we need to do it for another year or another year because the climate's changing all the time. It seems a spurious argument to put forward. If they haven't got the data, because the prevailing wind's the prevailing wind, it might go stronger or less strong. They've got the data they require, and so I don't see any reason for an extension. So I tend to agree with Archie and them, because I believe that if you're going to use climate conditions as a change, we don't know what's around the corner. You come here every year and say, oh, the wind's changed. It's whatever.
Thanks for that. Tom?
Thanks, Chairman. I mean, bear in mind, we did have a seminar a wee while ago on the whole question of anemometers and how long they should be there for, because we're looking to maybe try and have a consistent approach across the region. And it was decided then it all depended on conditions and whatever else. But this one's now been there for nearly 6 years. And I'm inclined to I agree with Archie in this one, that, what we've got to bear in mind is that the first 2 permissions were done under delegated powers. Therefore, there was no debate or discussion by committee. Now, we've now had objections to this continuation, which means it's the first time we're actually hearing it as elected members. And it raises a further question that we need to look at our policies, that I don't think that delegated powers should be allowed to keep continuing an application. Had there been no objections, we would not have known about this, and we probably have continued. So I think we, as elected members, need to say to officers, you're only getting delegation once. If somebody comes back in for another bite at the cherry, it should come to us to make the further decision, rather than continually granting a permission to some developer who's too lazy to ask for the original time he wanted in the first place. And I get a wee bit sick of these developers taking us for a ride and taking the public for a ride. So it's high time we taught 1 or 2 of them a lesson. I'm inclined to go along with Archie in this one. Let's just refuse it and take our chances.
Gillian?
Just to remind members that it's on planning grounds that any motion or amendment has to be made. Thank you.
Jim?
It's an observation, Chairman. We constantly restrict applicants to a period of time. And the last paragraph in 1.7 will just about kick the door open for every anemometer applicant to come back and say the circumstances have changed. Here's the reason why we want an extension. And I think we should be very strict about the permissions we give, and there should be very specific and detailed reasons why we should change that view if we are to consider an extension. And that, I think, would just cause a real problem in the future, notwithstanding every application is judged on its merit.
Ian?
So I think Archie's correct in this case. I think it's unbalanced, and Ian Blake actually summed up in as far as I don't think the mast hasn't moved, hasn't got any higher, so therefore there's been a large degree of time in which to gain or collect the data.
Gillian?
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm that at present we have a motion by Councillor Dryborough, seconded by Councillor Blake, to refuse the planning application on the grounds that it is contrary to policy OP1 based on the scale and density of the animated mast at the location. And we have an amendment by Councillor Geddes, seconded by Councillor Dick, to approve the application subject to the conditions as detailed in the report.
Right. Any other member? No. Go to the vote.
Councillor Martin.
Amendment.
Councillor Dempster.
Amendment.
Councillor Blake.
Motion.
Councillor Carruthers.
Motion.
Councillor Dick.
Amendment.
Councillor Diggle. Councillor Dryborough.
Motion.
Councillor Ferguson.
Motion.
Councillor Geddes.
Amendment.
Councillor Gilroy.
Motion.
Councillor Groom.
Motion.
Councillor McGregor.
Motion.
Councillor Maitland.
Amendment.
Councillor McCaughtry. Councillor McComb.
Motion.
Councillor McKee.
Motion.
Councillor Ogilvie.
Motion.
Councillor Thompson.
Motion.
And Councillor Witt.
Motion.
With 14 votes to the motion and 5 to the amendment, the application has been refused. Thank you.
Okay, Gillian. Item 6 on the agenda, the erection of an 80-metre high meteorological mast for a temporary period of 3 years at Course Hill, Dalry. And the application is 15/P/2/0287. And we've got Robert speaking on this one again. Robert?
Thank you, Chair. Just before I run through the slides, there's a minor correction to the report at 1.3. It refers to planning permission at Knockman Hill, reference 10P221, which is yet to be issued. That remains the case, but the reason why it hasn't been granted permission is different to that quoted in the report. There were two prerequisites to the issue of planning permission. One was the conclusion of the Section 75 legal obligation, and one was exhibiting an agreement from NATS that aviation interests would not be affected, and there was an agreement with them. It's actually the NATS agreement that's still to be exhibited, not the Section 75 legal obligation. The landowner contacted me yesterday just to update me that the Section 75 legal obligation was not actually now in place. So it was just to correct that point. Moving on to the slides, the application site. It's similar to the previous one, but obviously further to the east. You can see it's marked by the red cross. In between Corse Hill to the north and Knockman Hill to the south. So that slight saddle of land that will become more apparent in the photographs. A fairly standard mast elevation. Again, it's got guy wires, central mast, and it would have proposed bird diverters which are part of the recommended conditions. Base to tip height on this proposed mast is 80 metres high. You can see the actual application site as a reference point. The previous mast you were considering is there. This mast is further across, so quite elevated and further from the viewing point. You'll also notice that the application you're considering is not in situ at the moment. And this is a view of the proposed site in the distance, looking over Lockerbie Reservoir. You can just see the dam in the distance. This is looking in a broadly south to southeasterly direction. What you're looking at here is a proposed temporary mast, temporary in the sense they're looking for a period of 3 years. There hasn't been a mast in this location previously, so this is their first application at this location. It does link to the same project that was put forward in relation to the previous one. Now, this has been subject to formal pre-application consultation, but there has not yet been a planning application. This is summarised at 4.2 of the report. The recommendation is to grant permission for 3 years with reinstatement requirements embedded within condition 1 as well. The bird diverters would be required by condition 2. With regard to aviation lighting, again, as is fairly standard, that would be required to be infrared lighting and installed in the mast at the highest practicable point. So the recommendation is to approve subject to the conditions listed in the report. Happy to answer any questions at this stage,
Members,
Chair.
point of clarification. Robert, Jim.
Thanks, Chair. Am I correct in assuming if a NATS agreement is produced, they will already have permission for a 55-metre anemometer mast?
Robert.
Sorry, Chair, just to clarify, yes, that would be the case. The Millmark St Johnstown of DALRY case, the one at Knockmanhill, 10P221, it was for the erection of 5 wind turbines, 81 metres to blade tip, and an anemometer mast, 55 metres high, control building, etc., as itemised in the report at 1.3, page 49. So, yes, if they could exhibit they had an agreement with NATS, that would be the trigger point to issue the planning permission, because that was one that had already been through the Planning Applications Committee, and you were minded to grant it subject to the conditions listed and subject to them dealing with those 2 points as well. So, yeah, that would be the situation.
Alistair.
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. I hesitate to use the word policy, but am I correct in saying, sir, that our tendency as a committee in the past, and the comparatively recent past anyway, has been that where such applications are submitted and are basically deemed to be acceptable, that the period of duration has been reduced to 2 years. Is that correct? I noticed that one of the paragraph 3.1 C reference is made to that by, I think it would be the objector. So I'd be grateful for clarification on that.
Sorry, I thought Robert was going to jump in there. There is no policy in the LDP on anemometer masts in general, nor is there a period of time which is specified. It has been the practice of the Planning Applications Committee to go with 2 years. As officers, if we can see no legitimate planning reason to not give what has been sought, then we will go with that. But yes, it was clearly recognised that when we made that recommendation that if members wish to be consistent with their practice, then it could well turn out as 2 years if it were to be approved.
Thank you. Any other members? Nope. Could we have Alison Chapman here, please? You have 3 minutes again, Alison, and I'll let you know 30 seconds to go.
Okay. In 2013, permission was granted for 5 81-metre high turbine wind farm on Knockmanhill, as we know it locally. The successful demonstration by the applicant with confirmation from NATS en route that a satisfactory contractual agreement to secure the procurement of identified aviation mitigation measures had been completed was the first condition. The second was the successful conclusion of a Section 75 planning obligation within 6 months or at a time to be determined by the appointed officer. There must therefore exist a clear conflict of purpose of development if this site is consented, and if the proposed turbines are used to accommodate a mast of similar height. There's also the question of development principle, bearing in mind the requirement of the local development plan to respect, protect, or enhance the region's rich landscape character. In the current Lockhill wind farm application, which conjoins the Knockman site with the failed application by 2020 renewals, it is clear that this application is for a commercial wind power station of a major kind, in fact and in essence, an industrial power station. If the condition referring to a contractual agreement with NATS has not yet been achieved, just as the S75 agreement has not been concluded, then it is necessary to consider the request recently made to the CAA of the General Aviation Awareness Council regarding the conspicuity of anemometer masts. They suggest painting them orange with white stripes, giving them reflective bird deflectors, high visibility sheaths, and mats of contrasting colour to the ground at the foot of the mast. I would ask you to remember the close proximity of Loch Ken and the special protection area on the Kendee marshes, the migration paths of whooper swans and the presence of golden eagles and the newly reintroduced red kite, together with a host of other natural and cultural heritage treasures, such as ring and cut marks,
30
the
seconds
white
to go,
cairn,
Alison.
etc.
30 seconds to go.
All right, thank you. The precautionary principle should be urged to respect, protect, and enhance our children's heritage, and this application should be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any points? Could you remain in your seat, Alison, please? Just a second.
It's a hot seat, Chair.
No questions from any members? No, it's fine. You may leave your seat now, Alison. Sorry.
I can now go. Thank you.
Members, we're now in session. Archie?
When I looked at this application, Chair, I thought about it, no, here we go, hedging your bets on this one. If we refuse the previous one, they'll get this one up. But there's nothing planning-wise I can see why we shouldn't refuse shouldn't refuse and go with the recommendations in this particular one. But coming back to what Alistair said earlier on, we did have, a glut of these in 2014-15, where we did, as part of the conditions, reduce it to 2 years. And I would suggest that we go along with the recommendations, but reduce it to 2 years, if that would be appropriate to members.
Tom?
I was going to agree with Archie. I think that we do reduce it to 2 years. I think that when we send them the letter saying they've got permission, can we make it in heavy type that it's only for 2 years? Because bear in mind their previous record on remembering when to take these things down, it might not do any harm to make it in very, very heavy type, so as understand it is for 2 years from the date they receive the letter.
David?
Chair, just to confirm that if you look on page 52, 53, the way conditions come out in actual decision documents is wherever they are in bold, that and the report, that's actually how they come out in reality as well. So yes, it would be, if members were minded to go with a 2-year period, it would be definitely in bold.
Alistair?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, sir, that's an operational matter, and I have every confidence in leaving that to Mr. Sutty, but otherwise, delighted to support Archie and Tom's suggestions.
David?
I should have asked Robert earlier on, Chair, I'm sorry about that. Can you clarify what the situation is with the previous application? Is that still on the go, subject to Section 75, or has that died a death?
Robert?
Just to clarify which, I can talk about both. Are we talking about the previous application for the Met Mast with the condition that hasn't been complied with, or the previous application at Knockman Hill? Previous application for the Met Mast?
The Section 75 agreement for the...
Right, the one at Knockman Hill.
10p, aye.
Okay, I might talk about both if I may, Chair. The application at Knockman Hill went to committee with the two prerequisites in addition to the conditions. You were minded to grant it subject to the conclusion of those. I had understood that the Section 75 had not been concluded, but I was corrected yesterday by the landowner. It's in actual fact the agreement with NATS with regard to aviation mitigation that has not been exhibited to the council, and that's preventing issue of the planning permission. So that until such time as that has been satisfied, the intended decision of the members can't translate into a formal decision notice. So at this point in time, the formal planning permission hasn't been issued. With regard to the earlier decision about the Met Mast, the one that was there without planning permission, with any development like that, you're always looking and deciding whether or not, when you're aware of a breach of condition, you decide is it expedient or not to take enforcement action. And when a planning application is submitted to try and remedy the breach of planning control, you usually let that application take its course. In that case, obviously, as I was minded to recommend to you that permission should be granted, although you took an alternative decision, it was not considered that it was expedient to take enforcement action. Although given the decision that you have taken, that will obviously change now, and we will pursue a breach of conditions in respect of that application.
Jane?
Thank you, Chairman. I can't find anything online here on e-planning about the issue that was raised. I mean, supposing the Civil Aviation Authority did want it painted fluorescent pink with orange spots on the ground, it's not clear from the conditions here that we could actually prevent that.
We consulted NATS in the proposal and they had no objections, nor did RSPB Scotland.
No one else? I mean, agreement? No one agreed? Joanne?
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm that the application has been approved subject to the conditions detailed in the report, with the change for a period of 3 years to 2 years. Thank you.
We now go on to item 7, the change of use of storage unit to commercial gym at Backstreet, Thornhill, reference number 15/B/3/0454. Claire speaking on this one. Whenever you're ready, Claire.
Thank you, Chair. Just to go through the application site relates to an existing storage building off Back Street in Thornhill. Back Street is a cul-de-sac and the site is surrounded by residential properties. This shows the floor plan of the building, which is 22.8 metres by 8 metres. Open plan arrangement with roller shutter doors, access on the northwest elevation, and fire exit on the south. This shows the taking photographs. The building itself is the cream building to the right hand part of the photograph, and there's the informal sort of hard standing adjacent to this building. And this is panning right from the previous photograph. This is looking up towards 3 to 4 Morton Street. And at the front of the building, you can see some hard standing, but which allows for up to 4 car parking spaces, which obviously could be reduced because it's obviously at the end of the cul-de-sac, and that's where vehicles would turn. This shows the rear of the building, looking onto the rear of the properties on Muir Hall Road. And then panning left again from the previous photograph, this shows the sort of gardens to the rear of the building, with St Cuthbert's Walk to the left and Muir Hall Road to the right. And this is looking towards the site with 456 Morton Court on the right-hand side. And then the final photograph panning left from that previous one, looking down Back Street. The proposal itself relates to the existing storage built unit, which is 160 square metres within the largely residential area, and is a change of use to a commercial gymnasium, which is a Class 11 use. The report sets out the key issues in determining of the application, which is considered against policies OP1 and CF1 criterion A. In summary, the key issue relates to the roads, traffic and parking and turning at the end of this cul-de-sac. As paragraph 4.11 in the report highlights, the level of use of the proposed gym is based on a single person operating as a trainer with 5 clients. And at this level, it is acceptable to the Roads Authority. However, there is a recognition that the open plan nature and the size of the building could easily accommodate and increase the numbers to the proposed gym. Paragraph 4.12 in the report makes it clear that whilst operating hours could be controlled by planning condition, the numbers, classes and staff levels could not be controlled, as they would not meet with the tests set out in Circular 4 of 1998. So given the lack of suitable parking and turning, the further intensification of use would be unacceptable and contrary to policy OP1. Other matters relating to noise and alternative future uses are addressed in paragraphs 4.14 and 4.16 of the report, and these could be dealt with by a planning condition. So to conclude, the proposal is therefore recommended for refusal on the grounds stated in the report and as being contrary to OP1.
Thank you, Claire. I could just say we've got Ken Druitt here for the roads in case there are any questions on the roads. The members, any points, clarification? Andy?
Just one thing, Chair. Could you take us back just a couple of pictures, because I saw another, that tarmac area, no, that tarmac area on the right, who does that belong to?
That's actually the stone wall you can see there. That's 4, 5 and 6 Morton Court. So that's into the, there's sort of, the buildings are at an angle and that's sort of cut through. So if you go back to the previous one. Looking up towards, can you see the gable end?
Yeah.
But there's a wall there. Well, there's a cut through there of 2, 3, 4 and
the ground on this side, who does that belong to?
That, don't know. It's not the applicant's anyway.
Right, okay, thank you.
Any other members? Nope. Rose Mosley, please speak on behalf of this application. You've got 3 minutes, Ross, and I'll let you know 30 seconds to go.
Cheers, thank you. Good morning. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Ross Maudsley. I am 25, a level 3 qualified personal trainer, and I am the intended occupant of the building in Back Street. My proposal is to create an environment for the residents of Thornhill where the focus will be on helping people from high school students to the elderly improve their lifestyle, enhance their knowledge of nutrition and fitness, and increase their independent lifespan through functional training. I have been running MetaFit classes at Thornhill Community Centre since November, and have been encouraged by the enthusiasm of the participants who are hopeful for greater opportunities for health and fitness within their community. This has been enhanced by the rumours that the community centre will be closing down. Many of the participants are Thornhill residents, and most currently travel to Dumfries in order to attend gym facilities. My proposal offers a solution to the needs and wants of the local residents. The OP1 policy states that proposals should minimise the need for travel by car and encourage active and more sustainable forms of travel. A local gym would reduce the need for residents to make regular commutes to Dumfries. This brings me on to the discussion to discuss the recommendation for refusal based solely upon insufficient provision for off-street parking and turning areas within Back Street. As previously mentioned, the site has been identified as a centre point of Thornhill, making it within walking distance for 90% of the local residents, thus reducing the need for vehicle traffic on Back Street. Evidence of this is the majority of current participants attending MITFIT at the community centre walk. Due to the nature of my profession, I will be encouraging clients to walk, cycle or jog to sessions to further promote a healthy lifestyle. I will further provide a bike rack for clients to use, along with other incentives if necessary. There is also easy access from the main street where parking and other transportation links are available, thus reducing the need for clients to park in Back Street. In relation to the current state of health within the nation, it can only be of benefit to the local community, and I feel that the advantages significantly outweigh the limitations stated within the report. All I ask is your support in improving the health and quality of life of small communities in Dumfries and Galloway. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Members, any questions for Ross? Patsy?
Yes, I absolutely understand your desire to get everybody to walk and cycle to this site, but in all honesty, is that absolutely a realistic expectation?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I think the nature of the business is to promote health and fitness, and I can set up things within the gym environment to reward people for taking the initiative to walk or cycle. I think it is. It'll work.
If they do decide to use their cars, is there alternative provision nearby, or is there not any car parking?
Within the site itself, no, there isn't.
I can see the pictures.
However,
there's not a lot.
Yeah, there's plenty of public walking. It actually states in the report that the main road is within 160 metres of the site. There is plenty of public parking on the main streets of Thornhill. There's the adjacent side next door, and anyone with some initiative, if they come down the street, they see it's full. Well, they're going to find a park elsewhere, and it tends to be on the public main street.
Yeah, members. Steve.
Thank you. One of the concerns raised has been about, taken as is, if it's just one trainer and, like, say, 4 clients, then obviously that would be quite a limited use or need for parking, for example. But it does mention there, that there could be scope to sort of expand. What's your, have you got any information on how that would look like?
In terms of what? What do you mean? How would it look?
Well, I think in the report that we've been sort of given, it's talking about the current parking arrangements and given the intention to run a kind of trainer and a number of clients, if you like, with a sort of caveat, sort of saying, well, yeah, that's all very well for now, but what happens if that expanded so you had loads of trainers, loads of clients, all in the one sort of building?
Okay. Well, due to the size of the building, I couldn't have too many more. I wouldn't be able to have any more than 2 or 3 trainers. It just wouldn't work. I plan to limit the number of classes. The nature I take my classes and my training, I don't deem it effective to have more than 5 to 10 people per trainer. So I would be reducing class sizes and limiting how many people I could have in a single session, due to safety reasons and the effectiveness of the training.
Any other members? Peter?
Hi, Ross. I see you live in Dumfries, so I presume you'll be travelling there by car.
Yes, so I intend to park elsewhere to allow, if there was a member to bring in a car, they could park.
Okay, answer my question. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else? No. Thank you very much, Ross. We have Richard Clark, please, the applicant. And you've got 3 minutes also, Richard, and I'll let you know 30 seconds to go.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I really don't have very much to say, other than I strongly support Ross Maudsley, because I think he will bring to Thornhill, with this gym, a very beneficial operation. So really, I'm supportive of Ross. As far as I can see, the concern of the officers is more about what we might do rather than what Ross is proposing to do at this moment. Well, it is backstreet Thornhill, so I don't think we're going to be setting up a swimming pool or anything like that. One's very conscious of that, and frankly, if the committee is minded to support the application, you know, we're happy with the restriction. It's this man we're backing, and as I say, I think it's something enormously beneficial to not just Thornhill, but surrounding. And really, I have no more than that to say, that it's not the future that we're looking at. It's getting this project, and I know his business. I know his business plan. That's why we're happy to have him as a tenant, and it doesn't require. We're not trying to create a Bannatynes. It's very much a one-to-one operation, and therefore I think I would therefore like to say, as the applicant, to allay the fears of the officers, if you like. And we're certainly quite laid back, relaxed about any restrictions, providing Ross can set up with what we set out in the application.
Thank you, Richard. Members? Jane? Right, thank you, Richard. Oh, Andy?
Thanks. I'm not sure it's material, but it is to me. What actually is the building used for just now, and what?
It's simply a storage building.
Last tenants.
Yes.
Who are the last tenants?
There haven't been any tenants since we built it. We completed it 2 or 3 years ago. We've been using it for just ordinary storage. I might say to you, if you like, as the owner of the building, interestingly, since Ross has come on the scene, we have had a serious application for using it as a storage building. But I feel strongly what he's proposing is good for Thornhill and its people. And I certainly wouldn't be looking, if you support this, we're keen to do it.
Thank you. Andy? Nope. Thank you, Richard. Members, we're now in session. Patsy.
I'd just like to ask the planning officers, you know, OP1 is being used as a reason for refusal, but also as a reason why it shouldn't be refused. So I'm just kind of, and I haven't got the whole thing in front of me, so I don't quite know which. You can pick and choose of these things, obviously, but you know, we're being told it's against OP1 because of the insufficient off-street parking. But I think we were all, or by the applicant, we were also told that actually we were meant to be trying to stop people travelling miles to go and do things and have things more in an area, and that's also part of OP1, if I'm right. I just wonder what your views on that are.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, there are component parts A to G of policy OP1. The one which was referred to in terms of the representations there was sustainability. Yes, obviously that is something that we're very keen to encourage, and it underlies many of the proposals and recommendations. But related to that is OP1A, which is general amenity, which looks at these issues there. E is transport and travel. All these things are being looked at together. On balance, the key thing which we're looking at here is that development, not just by this particular applicant. I listened carefully to what was said there, that this is the individual here, and we have heard what the individual's proposals are. The difficulty in land use planning terms is that planning permission runs with the land, not with the applicant. So it's what could be. It's what could this be in the future. It's trying to ensure that whilst if this particular proposal is acceptable in its own merits, how could you actually restrict it to being just that? And as Claire's set out in her report, really the key bit is paragraph 412 and 413. This building could quite legitimately increase its usage from what we're being told, and that would be out with planning control, and therefore we'll be creating a problem in this area. And that's really what it comes down to.
Ian?
Thanks, Chair. The reason given for refusal, allowing unrestricted use of this nature likely to be detrimental to affect road safety. I understand at the moment this is a commercial building, so you could actually reasonably have trucks running up and down that road. to me, this is the kind of application that, I mean, if we insist that it's contrary to policy OP1, then I would argue that there are grounds for being out with policy on health and well-being grounds and socio-economic grounds. And on that basis, I'm quite sure, given what the applicant has said about traffic mitigation there, that there are ways in which you can manage that. And I feel that given the fact that it is a commercial building at the moment, and that conceivably trucks can go up and down there, what's going to be worse in terms of road safety? So I would go as far as to move it on those grounds, contrary to policy OP1, if that's insisted upon, on socio-economic grounds and health and well-being.
Gail?
Thank you, Chair. Much of the points that I was going to raise have been covered, but I think there's a lot of contradiction in the report. The Council Roads Officer has suggested that it's approved subject to conditions, and then there's an awful lot of information on page 58, and then further at 4.7 on page 62, all citing that there are sufficient space for parking at the level that will be used at the moment, and yet the recommendation and the reason for refusal is in complete contradiction of what the roads officer has said previously in the report. So, as I said, we've got a bit of contradiction with that. And I note that it has been a poultry unit before, so presumably it probably had quite a lot of larger vehicles moving to and from. I have no problem with this, and I'd be very happy to second Councillor Dick.
Could we have Alistair?
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. I must confess that, and I say it from a purely hypothetical perspective, given the shape of me, but I must confess that I am extremely sympathetic to this proposal. I think it would be a benefit to this specific community, and if replicated elsewhere in the region, would probably have benefits in other locations as well. The issue, as far as I'm concerned, well, there's actually more than one. The big issue, paragraph 4.12, we're talking about Scottish Government Circular 4/1998 on the use of conditions. It would seem to me, Chair, that, and I understand why the comments are in the report, and I understand Mr Sutty's views as well, but it would seem to me that in various circumstances, this circular, these conditions or stipulations will act as a brake and a disincentive, as it were, to legitimate and beneficial forms of development. And I feel, I'm not suggesting for one moment, you know, we should be making policy in the hoof, but it was a bit ironic that Alex Neil was asking recently, you know, for comments on the review of the existing planning system. And maybe sometime in the future, we should be looking, in fact, at the ability where an applicant finds it acceptable for a planning authority in granting a consent, you know, to impose conditions of this type. And as I say, if the applicant finds that acceptable, these thereupon are taken forward on that basis. The other point I would make, Chair, is that, and it's maybe being somewhat pedantic, we're talking on the grounds for refusal and the interests would be detrimentally affecting road safety. Now, I find that just a wee bit ironic, bearing in mind that the Council Roads Officer was asked for his comments and his views, has made it clear, in fact, that he has no objections to offer in this connection. Technically, Chair, as Alistair Speedy will tell you, of course, it's the domain of Police Scotland to deal with road safety issues. And maybe in cases like this in the future, we should be asking Michael MacDonald and Police Scotland to comment, as it were, in this regard, because, as I say, we've got to get the message across. It's not the first time I've said it in this chamber, Chair, that Dumfries and Galloway is open for business. And I would like to think at the end of the day that with a bit of ingenuity and a bit of creativity, we can grant this application, encourage the applicant to go forward for the wider benefit of the community as well as for himself, of course, but do it in such a fashion, Chair, as to mitigate any possible adverse impacts on the immediate community. And surely, given the cerebral capacity around the table, Chair, it's no beyond the wit that we can achieve that objective today. Please.
Thank you, Alistair. Peter?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, there's no mention about any consultation with the Community Council. I was just wondering whether there had been one or not.
Good.
community councils are not formally consulted on every application. What happens is they are sent the weekly list. It is then up to them. They've got 7 days to decide if they wish a formal consultation. So the absence of a comment from a community council here means that they obviously didn't wish to be formally consulted on it.
Right. Jim?
Thanks, Chair. The community centre's not going to shut, and we've had written confirmation that there's no nonsense being portrayed here about community centres. Thornhill Community Centre is quite safe. Policing, that'll not work, Alistair, we both know that. And there is a big issue about parking in Thornhill, like everywhere. You jockey for position trying to get parked. Anybody that believes that folk will walk and cycle to a fitness suite, they're living in a different world from me. Probably right. And you just need to look at primary schools to see how children get to school. No, that wouldn't work. I'm happy to support the officer's recommendation.
Tom?
I'm quite supportive of Alistair because, like him, I'm more an example of a healthy appetite rather than healthy eating. And I've got a great deal of sympathy about perhaps granting this, that what we need to look at is conditions that would have to be laid vis-a-vis noise, opening hours, etc. Now, I don't know what conditions were laid when it was given permission to be a warehouse. Presumably, at that time, because there were residential properties nearby, there were conditions about its use as a warehouse, etc. So I'd be happy to support it, provided we can put conditions in there about opening hours and noise levels. I don't know if officers can do that under delegated powers, or if we have got a template there we can use.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'll try and stick to planning concerns rather than anything else. Absolutely. 4.5 actually, I think, sets it out perfectly. On page 62, we could view this, the commercial gymnasium, as a community facility. We could look at it as, to use a term in from another setting, co-production between local business and the local community, improving the health and well-being of that community. So I'm minded to actually to support the approval of this, and I actually think this is a time because there is no clear policy on this type of facility, so it's an interpretation of we're looking at here.
We've got Ronnie, and then we've got Alistair. Now, how can wind this all up? It seems to be everyone approves of the application. Jane as well. Ronnie.
Thanks, Chair. Everybody's mentioned 411, 412 and so on, but if you look at other matters at 416, that gives me the comfort that we could have some control over this and allow it to develop. And I know from personal experience that many gyms have been set up in former industrial units, and they seem to be thriving, and there's no problem. So be consistent across the region. I would quite support this, taking in view of the conditions that's already spelt out here, the 411, 412, 413, and summed up in 416.
Ronnie. Alistair.
Thank you, Chair. That was exactly the point I was going to make, and I think 416 says it's basically, if we tied in the fact that we made a condition it was to be restricted as a gymnasium. I mean, in the paragraph itself, it indicates that yes, it could, if we didn't have this condition, it could be turned into a dance hall. But look at the size of the premises. I think that's highly unlikely.
Thank you. Jane.
I have a lot of sympathy with what other members are saying, but I do think we do need to think very carefully about creating conflict, and I can imagine that there would be conflict. There's nothing worse than parking to create neighbour disputes. In fact, Patsy and I actually represent a village where there has been real problems, and it does create neighbourhood misery. Is there any way in which we could offer a temporary permission, a suck it and see permission? I think we've done that in the past. but I would ask for officers' advice on this. I think the general consensus is that we do want to help this, and I, for one, would certainly support it. But I would be concerned a bit about parking and traffic concerns of neighbours. So I would take advice on that, whether it's possible to offer a temporary permission.
David?
Thank you, Chair. I'm desperately trying to remember what the Circular 4/1998 says on this, because certainly it says you cannot use a temporary condition or a restriction to an individual where it is a permanent building that is being proposed. But for a change of use, I don't see any reason why you couldn't. I mean, certainly I was taking note of what members were saying. Certainly you have got potential hours of operation condition in 414, 415. You've got about noise being inaudible at other properties. You could have a class 11 restriction. I mean, I think just to be clear, there was quite an amount of discussion about this proposal in the office, as you can imagine, with some differing views on it. But ultimately, the concern was not the proposal that would come before us, it's what it could be. And I think already we heard presentations saying that the most that the building could have is 2 to 3 trainers with up 5 to 10 people per trainer. Well, if you work that out, you're already up about 18, 19 people coming along to that building where you've got 14 spaces. So that's the concern. It's not what it might be, it's what it could be. And the floor space will obviously be limited. It's got no room to expand. And no, we're not expecting a swimming pool or anything like that in there. You could attach a condition if members are so minded to have it a temporary permission, I think. It's not something I've done before. You could restrict it to the individual applicant, which would be another way of dealing with the same thing, that what you've heard today is really just holding it to the the applicant's not the same as the person who would be developing it. Yeah, possible, but it's tricky.
Right, finally, David.
Sorry, Chair, I didn't want to upset you. The last sentence on 416, a condition would therefore be recommended limiting the premises to use as a gymnasium where members mind the grant plan permission. And another thing I would draw your attention to is that gymnasiums, if you go across to Lorburn Hall, you'll notice in the gym there's a lot of equipment nowadays. So there'll be a restriction on numbers provided by, I would assume the gentleman's going to use some different equipment for the training. So that would restrict the numbers that could get into the building anyway. Thanks, Chair.
Ben?
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, perhaps with Councillor Dick and Councillor McGregor, that the Councillor Dick put forward a motion, and I just want to double check I've understood it correctly, that it would be contrary to policy OP1, and we should
well, that was the wording that was used, but I was presuming what you meant was you'd be minded to approve it as an exception to policy on the basis of...
That's exactly, on the basis of the reason that was given under OP1. If it had to be as a, contrary to it.
and it was based on the benefits of social, economic grounds and health and well-being. And that was seconded by Councillor McGregor. And that would be with appropriate conditions in relation to out of hours operation, noise, and class 11 use. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gillian, can you confirm the decision of the committee?
Thank you, Vice Chair. The application has been granted. On the basis that it complies with OP1 in relation to the social, economic and grounds and health and well-being, and there'll be appropriate conditions in relation to the out of hours, the noise and the class 11 use.
Where does that sit with Councillor Maitland's request that it be a temporary permission? Well, that was one of the things that Jen Maitland asked, and it was debated as well. So we're just in the process of making the decision now. Are you saying then it's a permission granted? That Councillor Maitland's request isn't included in the decision? You happy with that, Councillor Maitland?
It seems to be the will of the committee, so who am I?
Okay. For clarity, just repeat the decision again, please, Gillian.
Thank you. The decision has been made that the application has been approved, that it complies with policy OP1 and the social economic grounds and health and wellbeing grounds, and there will be appropriate conditions in relation to out-of-hours operation, noise and Class 11 use.
Thank you, Gillian. We'll go on to item 8. Erection of holiday lodge with associated access track, car parking and landscaping at KIPPFORD, KIPPFORD, Dalby. The application type is full plan permission. Recommendations approved subject to conditions, and the case officers Judith Turnbull. Judith, will you take us through your presentation, please?
Chairman, can I come in, please?
Yep. Yeah.
Sorry, my apologies. As a matter of consistency, I should have declared an interest in this one. I had a holiday home with Mr. Ashton and his family for some considerable time, and I have done in other applications from them.
Thanks for that, Ian. In that case, you'll be leaving the room. Aye. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes.
Just wait until Ian leaves, please. Thanks very much, Judith. You can continue now, please.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's an application at KIPPFORD Holiday Park for the siting of a lodge and associated works. There's the application site's just on top of the application site label on the slide. The site's adjacent to KIPPFORD, which is a development of 9 lodges, sites within the Solway Coast Regional Scenic Area and adjacent to an area of designated ancient woodland. There's a bit of history associated with this site, and it's detailed in paragraph 1.7 of the report. The most recent application in 2015 was for the formation of a hard-standing and associated works, which was approved by the Planning Applications Committee in September 2015, and the siting of a caravan unit on this site is approved under the 2003 application. Moving on to the site plan, there's the KIP lodges to the west, Doonpack Caravan Park to the north, and Woodland and Garden to the south and east. The main part of the site would be for the siting of the lodge, and the small thin part is the access track from the existing road, which you'll see further on in the slide. This is the site block site plan and section. Sorry, I missed one. Block plan. This shows the position of the lodge. Position of the lodge, access track, parking area, and turning would happen here. There's planting, proposed planting along this boundary here. The proposed planting would include rhododendron, laurel, and holly. Moving along to the site plan and section, this shows the height of the lodge being 1.7 metres above the road. The datum of 0 is at the end of the road, which is here. So the finished floor level of the lodge would be 1.7 metres above the road, which would be about 300 metres above the finished floor level of the adjacent chalets 5 and 6 lodges. Here's the floor plan, showing the decking at ground floor level and gable balcony at first floor, which is clearer on the elevations, the front elevation, rear elevation, and the two side elevations. This is photo montages which have been provided by the applicant to show the comparison of the caravan, which has permission in the top image, which would be similar to the style of the caravan's lodges. Technically, definitely fulfill the definition of a caravan, but they're generally referred to as lodges. And this proposal here could be, the caravan here could be put in position at the moment, and this is the lodge, photomontage of the lodge which is being applied for. This is the view towards the site from the C24. The access to the site is in the bottom right-hand side of the image. The access to KIPPFORD. This is moving. Sorry. This is taken from the junction of the C24 looking into the KIPPFORD development. The site is at the back of the development. This one's taken adjacent to Lodge 5, looking into the site. There's been a bit of excavation has taken place, and the access track would run on the far side of the laurel hedge in the right-hand side of the image. This is taken from the access looking into the site. So you can see some excavation there. The position for the siting of the lodge would be just in front, and you can see that the road has been roughly formed. This is taken not quite from the back of the site because it's quite steep, but this is taken from just the far side of where the lodge would be sited. Looking down, you can see the access track coming in there, and it would loop round in front of the dike. So in conclusion, the proposal is considered acceptable in accordance with policy, subject to conditions on finishes, landscaping and an occupancy restriction, and the application is recommended for approval.
Thank you, Judith. Questions for Officer? Patsy and then Jim, please.
Well, it's the old chestnut of when is a caravan not a caravan. Are those lodges considered there, are they technically a caravan?
Judith?
Yes, they are considered caravans. They're double units, and under the definition of a caravan in planning, they are caravans.
If we go to 1.7 in the report, which was, it was given permission for hard standing last year, that was for the siting of a caravan, which one could have assumed would be similar to this. But what we're now being asked for is for a house, which is not a caravan.
I think it's a technicality we're working with.
Well, that's what I'm asking the officers, because it all kind of hangs on this, because we've been here before, haven't we, Judith?
I'll get David to deal with this, because I think the problem is, if it's a chalet, fits into what's described as a caravan, but I'll ask David to deal with it.
Yes, that's quite right. And certainly my understanding of this is that the very first application was pretty much what you've got before you again. That was recommended for approval by officers but refused by members, and the history of this is set out on page 68. What happened was that they then came back with just the hard standing, which could put a caravan, like you see on the photos there. They would meet the definition under the 1960 Caravan Act. What is being applied for now is being called a lodge and would not, by the size of it, meet the definition of a caravan, and therefore that's why it requires a planning application. That's why it's before you today.
I wish I hadn't asked that, Patsy. Jim and then Alistair.
Thank you. I'm looking for clarification on the height difference between the finished floor level of the proposed lodge and the neighbouring chalets. I'm assuming it is not 300 metres. Is it 300 millimetres?
Judith?
Sorry, yes.
Thank you.
That's a correction.
Good. Well spotted, Jim. Alistair?
I'm sorry, people must be reading my mind today. That's the second time I've come in behind somebody who's already asked the question I was going to ask. It's been answered.
Thanks, Alistair. Okay, Gail.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, and maybe it's a question for David or Judith. What's materially different about this application, the one that we did refuse on the grounds of it dominating the surrounding area and such like, on the 26th of November 2014? Is there anything materially different between the two applications?
Judith, would you like to answer that?
The proposed lodge, as far as I can see, is exactly the same. The main difference is that the level of this would be lower than what was proposed before. Before, the height proposed was 3.5 metres above the road, whereas now it is 1.7 metres above the access road. So the difference between the finished floor levels of the adjacent chalets and this one is now 300 millimetres, not 300 metres. So it's sitting 300 millimetres above lodges 5 and 6, whereas it was previously about 2 metres. So when I went back and queried it with the applicant, they said there had been an error made. I've checked over the drawings that were submitted, and the datum levels in a different place. So there was no mistake in the information that I presented in either case. I think the applicant says he'd made a mistake.
Okay, Gail. If there are no other members with questions for the officer, we'll come to the applicant. Can Robin Ashton come forward, please? And Robin, you will have 3 minutes with 30 seconds to go. I'll remind you just to sum up if you don't mind.
Good morning. We do have 9 existing, what I call lodge-style caravans, and the application is for a 1.5-storey lodge built of logs, almost certainly by the same manufacturer, therefore with very, very many features that will be the same throughout all 10 products at the development. It's already been discussed, the very minor difference in roof height. May I touch upon use? All of these, be they lodge-style caravans or this individual specific lodge, have a second home only use for the plot. So I wouldn't say that I would call this proposed product a house, though it does need to meet building regulations. Of the objections that were put in, one I do want to address, it was raised at the last application of mine as well, was access to the water supply infrastructure. And I've asked Judith Turnbull if she would prepare an image for you to see that I've shown where that's been built in. And you'll see just above the property, an orange, pink access road with steps down that spread to a path that gives access to the water tank and to the pump room. That access track is wide enough for, it's 2.5 meters wide, it's wide enough for a big digger that's quite big enough to dig out the water tank if that was to have a breach, and to lift it out and to replace it. An aspect that's different from from my first application a year ago is that my personal view is that was knocked on the head by photomontages produced by objectors, which showed the proposed lodge taken from my architect's plans.
You have 30 seconds to go, Robin.
Thank you. But the colours of the roof were really rather bright green, and the colours of the logs were not matching those of the present 9 lodges. And as a comparison, an end view of an existing lodge probably smaller back and looking further back and looking smaller. So it was done to shock, and I think it really did shock the committee. And the photographs that we now have that Judith Turnbull showed you, the two comparisons, is a fair comparison.
Can you just draw that to a conclusion now, please, Robin?
And I'm done, thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Can you just remain a moment, please, in case members have questions for you? Any questions for the applicant from members? Jane?
Yeah, can I be absolutely clear? I'm really sorry about these heights, but the roof height you're saying is how much lower than the previous application?
The structure is the same shape, but the ground has been lowered by around about 1 metre. And I would refer you back to the two photographs, that the lower left one of which shows the difference.
Does it follow that the roof level will be 1 metre lower than previous? Because then that's what Jane's trying to establish, how high the roof will be in relation to the year ago application.
Yes, the whole structure has simply come down. And the bottom left photograph there shows what it would look like. And I've done my absolute best to make sure the scales are as near perfect as I can. And as a comparison, if scales are perfect or not, the top right photograph shows what a regular lodge, slightly longer than what we're proposing, but at the height, I should say a regular lodge-style caravan would look.
Thank you. Any other? Jim, and then Patsy.
Thank you. I'm just trying to vision here. The finished floor level is 1.7 metres above the nearest edge of the site road, but yet it is only 30 centimetres, I take it, or 300 millimetres above the finished floor level of the adjacent chalets. Could you explain that, please?
I don't think I can speak with total accuracy, but what you see looking in there is the access road, and it's basically a circular access road around a very small lochen. And all the lodge-style caravans are raised up. The higher ones of the group are number 5, which you'll go back to the one you were, yes, this one here. And now could you go back one picture? That's number 5 in the center, with number 4 to the left, and number 3 just behind the bushes. But they are the higher ones above the road. And they are significantly above, that one shows being significantly above the height of the road itself. You'll see the dike there, that's a retaining dike to raise up ground level.
The discrepancy is due to the fact that the chalets are elevated significantly above the road.
Not all are elevated a lot, but certainly number 5, 4 and 3 are.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Patsy?
Yes, I just wonder, you've got permission to put a caravan unit on this site. I just wonder why you want to put something so much bigger in this site. And it's a holiday lodge, so presumably it's not for anybody to live in on a permanent basis. It's a holiday.
Yes, that's correct. Second home use.
So I'm just wondering what your reason is, because if you go back to the montage, it is quite considerable. It is a bigger property than you, that there. You know, it does much more substantial property than the rest.
Well, the difference is in the roof height to accommodate a bedroom upstairs. And the best reason I can give is since 2008, I have not sold a single extra single-story lodge-style caravan. Since the crash in the market, they are effectively deemed to be too expensive for the space they provide. So by the half-story addition, I feel that that will fit a place in the market.
Thanks, Patsy. Any other members with questions for Robin? In that case, can you resume your seat, please, Robin? Thank you very much. Members now in session. If there are no members with a specific view, are we prepared to agree the recommendation and conditions as set out? Agreed. Okay. Can you just confirm the member's decision, please, Gillian?
Thank you. Just to confirm that this application has been approved, subject to the conditions as detailed in the report. Thank you very much.
We'll now go on to item 9, 106 High Street, Lockerbie. Application 15/B/4/0270. And we've got Pat Hanna to speak to this one. Time you ready, Pat.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, there's a couple of members who need to come back in.
I'll just say it's for the siting of 2 refrigerated shipping containers to the rear of premises, retrospective, at 106 High Street, Lockerbie. On you go, Pat.
Thank you, Chair. I thought we were waiting for another member. Just an update to the report. At section 3 on page 77, the number of objections should read 9 and not 8, and should include Mr. Ian Ferguson of 11 Cameron Close, Lockerbie. And apologies to Mr. Ferguson for that error. As soon as it was identified, arrangements were made to ensure that Mr. Ferguson could come on and speak. The key issues relating to this application and the reasons for refusal relate to, firstly, road safety, specifically the increased HGV movements in the adjacent access road to the site, and secondly, the visual appearance of the shipping containers as permanent structures in the street scene. I'll just run through some of the photographs. The application site is defined in red, shown in the middle of the screen, and the site itself is accessed from Cameron Court, which is the road to the immediate south of the application site. The high street is shown running down the left-hand side of the image. This is looking south down the high street with Cameron Close on the left-hand side. And this is the view along Cameron Close from the high street, with the new residential development in the distance and the entrance to the site around the corner on the left-hand side. And this is the entrance itself. Again, you can see the residential development on the right-hand side of the screen. And the entrance to the site is between the vertical boarded fences that you can see. And between that, you can see one of the white or grey-white shipping containers. Moving forward, you can see one of the refrigerated containers in situ. It is sited on wooden pallets and has wooden pallets that provide a link to the existing building on the left-hand side. Looking across the wider area, you can see that there is parking of cars and vans in the distance, but within the yard area. And turning around and looking back, you can see that the yard area appears to serve a number of properties from the High Street and from Bridge Street. This is a view looking across the site again. And there would be an expectation as part of the proposal that HGVs would need to be able to turn in this area in order to serve the shipping containers. And as confirmed in the report, that is, or the ability to do that is quite heavily restricted. On leaving the site, this is Cameron Close with the exit to the High Street, turning to the right. And you can see that the road is narrow at this point with not particularly good visibility for an HGV leaving the site. And this is the critical image in my view, in that HGVs are required to navigate their way down Cameron Close here and then turn out onto the High Street at the end of the road. This is an alternative access from the High Street via Graham's Place to the site itself, but as plainly evident from that photograph, that's quite heavily restricted. So whilst the site has a historical right of access using the public road, the sites clearly demonstrate that there would be an adverse impact on road safety as a result of increased HGV movements using Cameron Close. And therefore, the recommendation is refusal on roads grounds, and that's supported by the roads officer. There is also a second ground for refusal, in that the shipping containers do not make a positive contribution to the built environment and the street scene. They are temporary structures, and as temporary structures, they're really not suitable for a permanent permission, which is what is being sought here. And so, therefore, for the reasons set out in the report, the proposal is considered to be unacceptable and is therefore recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, any points of clarification? Gail?
Just one very brief point, probably. Who owns the site, and does this particular applicant have a right of access over it, or do they have the right to actually cite anything on it? Who actually owns the site itself?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just go back to the map of the site. The application site is defined in red, and that is the site that is owned. It is understood that the applicant also has control of the yard area that is between between the application site and Cameron Close, and wraps around the back to the alternative access from the High Street. What's not clear is, given that that also serves a number of other properties, it's not clear from the information we have before us whether that's exclusive ownership or if that's shared ownership.
Andy?
Thanks. Can I ask the officer to move forward the slides just if you keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Yes, stop there. You see the big pile of pallets on the right-hand side? That would suggest HGVs already use this yard. So HGV use, wouldn't it be a barrier because it's already happening? Or what measures for the road officer are in place just now to mitigate the HGVs who are currently using that? So why would it be a restriction on this application if that was the case?
Right.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Clearly, there's a historical right of access to this site that allows any vehicles to access the site. The issue in this particular application is the intensification of use that would be brought about through the storage containers being sited there. And furthermore, this is a retrospective application, and therefore HGVs are currently using the site to access the storage containers and presumably the other properties that have rights of access to the yard as well.
Peter?
Yeah, so it's on a similar point, really. I'm not clear about the siting of these containers. You're saying is going to encourage HGV use. If these containers weren't there, and he had a building, for example, he still may be using HGV. So I don't see the relevance of this application in actually granting permanent storage containers there actually has an awful lot to do with the HGV access, and I wonder whether you could explain a bit more on that one.
Hi, Pat.
Again, thanks, Chair. Yes, again, clearly there is a historical right of access for any vehicle to use the yard area. The critical issue in this application is the fact that there's an expansion of one of the existing buildings that is being facilitated and brought about through the siting of these storage containers. And that expansion of the operations is requiring an increase in HGV movements, and it's that increase that is unacceptable.
Ian?
I was just going to ask when Cameron Court, the big building at the end, was constructed, and whether or not this as an industrial area was there, presumably before that was created. That's right, yeah, Reed Court. Reed Court. So it is relatively recent.
Good.
Just to add a bit of history here from somebody who used to work in Lockerbie for a long time. There was always Gardener's Close before it became Cameron Close. So there's, certainly in my time in D&G, some 20 years now, there's always been residential properties there. On page 76, you'll see that the history of the permission for the 4 affordable dwelling houses and the 12 flats to replace the existing flatted development was granted in 2009.
You, Davy? Another member? Thanks. Could we have Ian Ferguson, objector, please? You've got 3 minutes, Ian, and I'll let you know 30 seconds to go.
I haven't really got much more to add to your report. Unfortunately, as was explained, there was a slight hiccup in me being included in this debate. However, I can maybe make 1 or 2 things clear. The previous Gardener's Close had a far easier route in, and it was straighter. There wasn't a curve in the road. So that's one of the problems we face with heavy goods vehicles coming in and out of there at the moment. There has been an occasion where we have witnessed HGVs reversing in off the main road, along that road to gain access. We've also had vehicles stuck round the back on the ground that's supposed to be the turning area. Now, all this adds up to an increase in the danger for the children in that close. I've actually had to, myself, shouting to children to move away because a lorry had to reverse to get back out of Cameron Close. So it's, you know, the danger is there in that concern. And also the fact that these lorries cannot access this site without travelling along the pavement. You know, they just can't get in. I mean, I'm an ex-HGV driver myself, so I know the problems they face. But, I mean, I have actually refused to deliver in places like this myself because you just can't get a lorry in and out safely. Basically, that's all I've got to add. I mean, I think everything's in the report. So if anybody's got any questions, I'll try and answer them.
Points? No? None? No? Thanks, Ian. Could we have John Lawson and Elaine Kennedy Walton, please? Needed? Get 3 minutes and I'll let you know 30 seconds to go.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Elaine Kennedy Walton from Primrose and Gordon Solicitors, and I have with me Mr. Yildiz, who is the landlord and applicant. Now, Mr. Yildiz is a businessman who operates a number of hot food takeaway shops across Dumfries and Galloway. Now, in relation to the vicinity of the proposed application, it is a traditionally area used for industrial purposes.
During the residential development of the site that we've just heard about, the hammerhead which allowed turning was recited. At this point, Mr. Yildiz feels that there should have been a condition attached to the permission granted at that point, which would preserve the turning facilities for the HGVs which were already using the site at that point. Now, there is an issue with parking in Cameron Close as well, and I noticed from some of the photographs there were some vehicles who were double parked at that time. That is recognised to be an issue, but that is an issue which is not of Mr. Yildiz's doing. You can see from the extent of the site that he has access to there, that there's no need for any of his vehicles certainly to be parked on double yellow lines, but it's not something that he can be held responsible for. Additionally, Mr. Yildiz also allows residents of Cameron Court to use the site for parking, and some of their cars are on the photographs also. Now, I would say that in relation to the report, the applicant feels very much that the HGV traffic quantified is overestimated. He has told me that there was a period of time where the arrangement with the deliveries was settling down, and he has stressed to the distributors which come into Cameron Court that you cannot have articulated lorries in particular coming down to the site. In terms of the current level of deliveries, there is one HGV which delivers on a Monday and a further HGV vehicle which delivers on a Tuesday, and no articulated lorries at all. Mr. Yildiz has highlighted to me that there has been no incidents or accidents whilst this operation is a retrospective application, so he has been running his business from
30
this.
seconds to go, Elaine.
I would also like to stress the economic benefits of this business. There's 8 people directly employed on the site, and the business supports the supply to 70 businesses within the area. So there's definitely an argument here that there's economic benefit derived to Dumfries and Galloway from this operation. In terms of aesthetics, Mr. Yildiz is perfectly prepared to mitigate and comply with any conditions attached.
Please wind up now, Elaine, please.
And has suggested placing of concrete blocks around the containers.
Thanks. Members? Oh, Gail?
Yeah, just a couple of points of clarification, I suppose. I mean, when the original planning permission was granted, it was for a hot food takeaway and sit-down, obviously sit-in facility. It wasn't necessarily planning permission for an additional business at the back to provide the rest of the region. And that, I think, is probably my concern at the moment. Why would you require 2 massive, great big shipping units simply to store food for a relatively small takeaway and sit-in restaurant on the high street? Because we have many takeaways and sit-ins on the high street, and none of them have 2 massive containers at the back. So why would you require that sheer volume of storage for a sit-in takeaway restaurant?
That is accepted, and it is a distribution business that's being run also. I would point out that if the units weren't going to be there, that there could be an increase in the number of vehicles coming in and out of Cameron Close.
Any other members? Alistair?
Thank you, Chair. Just for the record, the Planning Applications Committee report cites Mr. Ifraz as the applicant, but now we have Mr. Yildiz.
Sorry, I should have clarified that. I was very conscious of the time restriction. Mr. Ifraz is the tenant, and Mr. Yildiz is the landlord who owns the premises.
Any other members? No. Thank you very much. Andy?
Thanks. I'm interested in the deliveries. You get 2 deliveries, if I picked up correctly. One on a Monday, one on a Tuesday, neither of which come in an Arctic. So are we talking here refrigerated small vans or big? What kind of size? Can you give us a clue exactly what type of vehicles coming in here?
There are 2 deliveries from 7.5 or 8 ton vehicles, one on a Monday, one on a Tuesday.
No other members, no other questions?
There are also some smaller vehicles, 3.5 tonnish, that come more frequently.
Thanks, Elaine. Members, we're now in session. You may take your seats. Members, we're now in session. Gail.
Thank you, Chair. It's probably a question for the planning officers. As I say, when we granted planning permission for this, historically back in 2008, it was for a hot food takeaway and, as I say, a sit-in restaurant. Would they require planning permission to expand that to a distribution business as well? Would it be seen as a separate business, or would it be sufficient under the current planning permission that was granted previously?
The case officer and myself did quite a bit of research on this, and most of this is just from my memory, going way back. There was a butcher's on the site before the hot food takeaway, and as I remember, the butchery part of it extended back, and that's the part that was effectively, that you're seeing in the slide there, that's almost been severed from the hot food takeaway part, and the hot food takeaway was the front and the cafe part. And the part to the rear never ceased its use. So as far as we can tell, there's never actually been a planning application to change the use of what was the butcher's business at the rear. The front, yes, but the rear has always just continued, and therefore it's, as far as we can tell, is an authorised Class 5 general industrial activity to the rear. But then that sort of expanded from being just related to the butcher shop to being a business which is intensified, and we had figures there about it's a distribution effectively to 78 businesses. So it has intensified quite considerably from just serving the former butcher shop on the high street frontage.
Sorry, just on that. I mean, I think my other issue is, and we've seen it again today, it's the retrospective. You know, people keep doing things without any due respect for the planning process and planning committee and planning officers, and I would be minded to go with the officer's recommendation.
Any other members? David?
I just want clarity on, you've got a comment in here under consultations where 2.1b are talking about articulated HGV vehicles going along this road. Is this in reference to the application site, or is this just HGVs, articulated vehicles using this road at all?
Right.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I think it comes back to the point that the site does have historical use, and so HGVs can legitimately and rightfully access the site. What this application is seeking to do is intensify the existing operations, and it's that intensification that would result in additional HGV movements, and which is unacceptable. But there is certainly nothing to stop HGVs accessing the site as it is at the moment. It is the proposed intensification of use as a result of the siting of the storage containers that creates the additional unacceptable usage.
Archie?
Thanks very much, Chair. I'm just looking at that couple of ISO containers here, basically, and they're sitting on wooden pallets, which causes me great concerns, health and safety-wise, for things that might actually go wrong. I'm listening to what people are saying, and I understand what we said earlier on, that Dumfries and Galloway is open for business, but we've got to do things within rules. We've got to do things within planning policy. We've got to do things, right to the best of our ability. My concern is that that there's obviously some road safety issues that have been raised within the report, but also raised within the representations that we heard as well. Taking all that into consideration, I've got some concerns here, so therefore I would go with the recommendation to refusing this.
Just to confirm, at the moment we have a motion put forward by Councillor McGregor, seconded by Councillor Dryborough, to refuse as detailed in the report. Any?
Jim?
I would just agree one in Thornhill on the same basis. There were objections about traffic flow, completely ignored by every member in the room. And here we now seem to be having a grave concern about this. And there is an issue about this, irrespective of the yard that's here. If that road, and if you're serious about road safety, you maybe want to put weight restriction on it, because there's no point in discussing it and then ignoring it. HGVs have either a right to travel it or they don't, and you shouldn't be refusing the mechanism to supply this business with HGVs when any HGV can run it at any time. And the other thing is, if you refuse it, and I would have to declare an interest because I left part of the meeting, so I wouldn't continue a vote if there's a vote about the approve or refuse. But if this business is actually serving 7 to 8 businesses, we need to have some mechanism of offering the applicant an opportunity to develop his business either there or elsewhere, not just throw it in the bin.
Members, we've got a motion here. Members agree with the officer's recommendation. Andy?
I have a degree of sympathy with what the Vice Chair's saying here, and it's just a pity they'd have to go and do something for a couple of minutes and leave the room, because if he'd been actually amending that, I would have been happy to second them, because let's look at ourselves. If this had been a distribution centre for Tesco's, we'd been jumping up and down and saying it's brilliant, bringing jobs to the area and everything else. So, however, I'm in the position here is that it is retrospective. There is a problem. My biggest problem will be dealt with outside here, and that is the traffic issue, which we cannot directly attribute to this person's business. It could be anybody's business, because there are other facilities up there. So I'll leave it at that.
Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I've got something to what Andy's saying. I mean, I've got a business here that's employing people, not just there, but in other locations. And we refuse this. That has an adverse effect on business. I take the point Jim's making. It's absolutely no different from the one in Thornhill. And, you know, we saw that road there, congested with motor cars. Well, it's quite an easy way to solve that, and that's just to double yellow line out on both sides of the road, and you'd have plenty of room for access. And be very careful putting restrictions on HGVs, because if anybody ever wants to move house, they're going to have to cart all their furniture up onto the high street to get a vehicle to take it away. So I'm not too happy about this restriction on the HGVs being in the recommendations. I'm certainly not supportive of the 2 refrigerated vans there, but I think if that there does concern me. But in terms of if they want to have a proper extension there, I wouldn't have any objection to that. But I think the traffic one's just a red herring, quite frankly.
Archie?
I just wonder what meeting we're at times, because road traffic acts and things like that would probably come under licensing rather as, you know, planning. There is a big difference between this one. You're talking about HGVs here, you were talking about cars earlier on. Cars, unless you actually bring, you know, people who are actually going to use a gym in the back of a 4-ton lorry like we did in the army, it's not going to make, you know, there is a difference here. And the issue is that we've seen that is actually really close to a bend in a road where there are children in areas. So therefore, I'm still going to go with the recommendation.
Right. Well, Gail, and then Peter, then
Thank
we'll
you.
go to the vote.
Just very briefly, there are 2 grounds for refusal in the recommendations, and obviously the HGV one is a factor, but it's not the only factor, it's the other one as well. And you know, I'm entirely for encouraging businesses in the town, but I think there's more appropriate locations for the nature of that business in the town, and we're dealing with what we have in front of us today. So, as I say, I stick with my original proposal that we go with
Finally, Peter,
recommendations.
and then we'll...
Similarly like Gail, I mean, I think I'm happy to support the motion as it stands, but I think we ought, as a council, we ought to be given the applicant some help in relocating to a more appropriate place, which there are places not very far away.
Ian?
Thank you, Chairman. Very briefly, I have a great deal of sympathy with what Councillor McCoskey said about the road conditions, the traffic conditions not being under that applicant's control. I do also share his concern about the 2 containers, and he mentioned if he was applying for an extension, then he would be positive towards it. Unfortunately, it's not. This is about 2 shipping containers retrospective, so I can't support it on that ground.
Right. Gail, I mean, Gillian.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, at the moment, as it stands, we just have a motion put forward by Councillor McGregor, seconded by Councillor Dryborough, to refuse on the grounds detailed in the report. Is there any other?
Otherwise minded? No.
Thank you. Just to confirm that the application has been refused on the grounds detailed in the report. Thank you very much.
Right, as it's now gone 1:15, I think we'll take a half-hour break for lunch and come back after at 1:15. Right, members, welcome back to this meeting. Next, we're on item 10 on the agenda. It's erection of temporary school building for a period of 36 months, formation of car parking, relocation for an electrical substation and associated landscaping works at St Joseph's College, Craigs Road, Dumfries. It's 15/P/3/0455. And speaking of this one, taking us through this one is Barry Duff. Say something.
Thank you, Chair. Just before we begin this item, we have Lindsay Baker, the Project Manager for Schools for the Future, who didn't register to speak. However, the Chair has allowed his discretion for her to speak in support of the application.
Right, Barry.
Thanks, Chair. I have one small update to make to the report. Paragraph 1.5 states that a biomass store is proposed, which would be permanent as part of a redevelopment. That isn't actually proposed under this application, although it is indicated on the drawings. But following me drafting this report, it was confirmed to me that it's part of the other application for the redevelopment of the school. There is also a condition 4, which clarifies this, that this doesn't have permission under this planning permission. Moving on to some of the slides. A location plan here, and this shows the location of the site, which is adjacent to St Joseph's College, to the west and northwest of the college. Has a boundary with the rear of the dwelling houses on Glebe Street, and also St Michael's Primary School, which is to the southwest corner of the site as well. The application site is also adjacent to several listed buildings, including St Joseph's College and the chapel. Site plan is existing. The site centres upon the area of open space, which is a playing field next to St Joseph's College. This playing field is protected open space within the local development plan. The site boundary also includes the car park area to the school and some areas of the access. The site plan as proposed shows that the proposed school would take up quite a lot of the area of open space that's there at present, and a temporary access is also proposed from Alderman Hill Road, which is to the left-hand side of the school. There are some trees also that would have to be felled as part of the proposal, which are to the boundary of the application site, the boundary of the playing field with the school. However, the row which is to the north of the site would be retained. The school is required for a 3-year period in order to facilitate the redevelopment of St Joseph's College. Floor plan here shows the extent of the buildings. There would be a series of single-storey porta-cabin type buildings. And the elevations. The top row there shows the elevations which face towards the rear of the dwellings at Glebe Street. And a 3D visual of one of the porta-cabin buildings. The land would be reinstated following the removal of the temporary buildings, and eventually it is proposed, obviously, that the school would be redeveloped and the playing field would be retained as a grass playing field. And some photographs, this one showing the view from Alderman Hill Road. The temporary access would be just beyond the bus bay. And another shot looking from Alderman Hill Road into the site. The existing car parking area, which would be retained throughout the period of the temporary school being in place, and a listed chapel beyond that. And another view across the site, showing the trees to the left-hand side there, which would be felled in order to facilitate the proposed extension to the school. And a view along a footpath which runs, which goes towards St Michael's Primary School. This would be retained when the temporary building is in use, but it would be closed for the period while the construction works are being undertaken. And a view back towards the school across the playing field. And from Craig's Road, which is at a lower level than the playing field. So it probably would be quite difficult to see the buildings from this level. So the application is recommended for approval on the basis that the buildings would be temporary and the impact would be fairly low in the area. And although it is within protected open space, it's considered that the temporary nature of the facility and the need for it to enable the redevelopment of St Joseph's College overrides this. Thank you.
Members, any questions for Barry? The only one I've got here is got to be, so I'll get it when it comes into general session. The questions, the members, no questions? Lindsay? You've got 3 minutes, Lindsay, and I'll let you know 30 seconds to go.
Thank you, Chair. The proposal is for St Joseph College staff and pupils to be temporarily located in the specially designed modular accommodation that's proposed. This will be on the existing playing field throughout the redevelopment and extension of the main building. During this period, they will continue to use the existing dining and PE block, the chapel, the annex building that's at the front of the main building, known as the pavilion, and the existing outside social spaces adjacent to the PE dining block. The temporary accommodation will be occupied from the start of the next academic year, this August, and will remain in place until the works of the main building have been completed in early 2018. We acknowledge that there may be some local disruption, but we aim to minimise this wherever possible. Our contractors have devised a traffic management plan which aims to mitigate the effects of traffic volume and environmental impact, which includes measures such as one-way system to minimise or avoid traffic on Glebe Street. The particular part of Glebe Street is from the main roundabout that goes up the three roads up onto Alderman Hill, as that's particularly congested and has been a historic problem. Works traffic will also be restricted to out with the peak hours of the schools to ensure the safety of pupils travelling to and from schools in the area. We have mitigated any negative impacts on the privacy of neighbours by limiting the height of the temporary units and the number of windows along the elevation towards the neighbouring properties. The remaining grassed area towards Craig's Road will still be shared with St Michael's Primary School and still allows a significant area of around 150 square metres for various playtime activities for them. It is acknowledged that the existing pathway to the rear of the primary school will have to be closed off for 3 months of term time to ensure the safety of the pupils and other users. I will be meeting with the parent council of the school in coming week to discuss that and any other concerns they have, and we'll continue to meet with them throughout to make sure that they're happy with the proposals. I'll also meet with the Safer Routes to Schools team to ensure that we have an alternative route for those 3 months to ensure safety and welfare of all. On completion of the works of the main building and the removal of the temporary accommodation, a new grass pitch will be put on site.
30 seconds, Lindsay.
And Along with the proposed synthetic pitch, that will greatly enhance the sports facilities for the community and school. The existing parking area at St Joseph's College will be maintained as it currently is, and site staff will be instructed to use the parking available publicly at Brooms Road and to ensure that neighbouring streets are not impacted upon. This will be monitored throughout the works to ensure it is adhered to.
Lindsay, the points of clarification, just myself then. The traffic management plan, how is that going to be managed? Because, as I say, coming in for Alderman Hill Road, there's just no an easy way. And to get that way, there's not an easy way to get back onto a main road. As I say, plus the parking in there is fully utilised every day. Anyway, the parking it is already there. And for expect them to park their cars in Brooms Road and move and walk are there, that car park is pretty full anyway. So it's got to cause congestion. And just what you said about Glebe Street, the one way for St Michael Street, more or less, to Alderman Hill Road. Which way is the one way going to be?
Just to clarify that there's two different parts of Glebe Street. There's the Glebe Street that's near Brooms Road, which we will be using, and then there's a Glebe Street that comes up between, which we won't be using because we know how bad that road is. We are retaining all of the existing car parking spaces on the site to ensure that, and we've liaised with the roads department to on site to make sure that that's the best approach. The one-way system, I'll get Anthony, who's from Graham Construction, to just clarify which direction that goes in, but it's with the aim of ensuring that you've not got traffic coming up and coming down in the same direction as well as other users at the same time. It is acknowledged it's very difficult. It's a difficult roads network to try and get in and out, so we're trying to do the best solution to make sure that we're not adding to the problem significantly.
Thank you. Essentially, having been through with the local roads department, we came up with this plan for a one-way system to enter from the Brooms Road direction and up Glebe Street there and on to Alderman Hill Road, but then to exit essentially following east again up Alderman Road and round back through, I think it is Eastfield Road, back work. The idea being, like Lindsay suggested, that it prevents trucks meeting essentially on Glebe Street, crossing direction.
Are we really expecting them to they will do that?
Yes. What we tend to do is we write into our subcontracts the requirements of the traffic management plan. We will constantly monitor that with both the police and the roads department to take action. The majority of the deliveries in this particular case will be obviously the temporary cabins. We have a good relationship with them. They understand the confinements and they're more than used to working in city centre sites, having to deal with these kind of issues.
I find it kind of difficult for that plan to actually, it may be to work like, when you know the road, as I say, I'm in that area like, and you know that road, and even in the mornings of that, it's absolute chaos there. So, as I say, I just hope it does work like, but as I say, I just don't think so.
Just also, sorry, just to clarify that we're avoiding the peak times when the road is particularly horrendous for that very reason. We don't want to be adding to that and potentially harming the safety of people.
Alistair.
Thanks, Chair. Much of what I was going to say you've said, but I'm pleased to see that you're going to meet with the parents of St Michael's Primary School Council, because I'm sure the Chair himself, as a NIF board member, has had similar complaints relayed to him, or concerns, particularly about the path and how the children can't gain access. They have to come by some other way, but you assure me the TMP is, you've given a lot of thought to it. One thing occurs to me, however, we get, as you know, from the Roads Department, notification of proposed road closures, and I noted recently that Brooms Road is to be closed from early April from Clarkhill to Leafield Road. That's not going to coincide with your works, is it? Because that will cause horrendous problems if they're both on at the same time.
Sorry, we weren't aware of that. We haven't obviously received any notices, but we'll happily meet with the roads and discuss that.
Chair, that's maybe a case when the council departments should maybe talk to each other more often.
Any other members? Jack.
have the same concerns about Glebe Street and the route round. And the one way that you're discussing to go onto Eastfield Road to get out again, I mean, that is a terrible junction there to get in and out of at the best of times. It's going to take some doing to actually look after the traffic in that area at that time.
Anyone else? Questions? Questions to Lindsay?
Are we finished? Sorry,
Well, that's what I'm asking. Is there any other member what your points of clarification for Lindsay? Nope. Right, thanks, Lindsay. Right, we're now in session. Andy?
Could we just put the question here? I'm happy to recommend it. Go with the recommendations.
I just hope Ken's there at the traffic management. As I say, we're saying they're going up over the hill to Eastfield Road. I just hope the traffic doesn't turn up Cresswell Hill to get an easier route onto the Brooms Road or that.
It's accepted that the road network around there is quite restricted, and I've discussed it with the police, and for the purpose of the traffic management plan, we're assessing, we've discussed with the applicant the best way to start off. The traffic management plan is a fluid document, and if it turns out that there are problems with particular aspects of it, we'll amend it as the project goes on. The traffic that's likely to be using Eastfield Road will be turning left because of the restricted height bridge on the right. So turning left out of Eastfield Road onto Brooms Road is significantly easier than turning right. So we don't envisage at the moment too many problems with using that route, but it is subject to change if we do find that there is problems.
That's fine. Archie?
I was just going to say, same as Andy there, just go with the recommendations, Chair.
Alistair, have you got anything other to say?
Well, I repeat what I said before. If Brooms Road is going to be closed for a certain time during the construction works, that will cause problems.
The works to Brooms Road have been programmed for several years. It looks as if they're finally coming to fruition, and they're very much overdue. They will be carried out in phases, and it won't be closed from Leafield Road right down to Clark Hill in one go. It'll be done in phases, and we would look to try and find a solution if they're accessing the site during that period.
I'm not against the works on Brooms Road. I've been moaning about them for ages, but I just thought I'd just point it out.
Members agreed? Go with the recommendations? Fine. Gillian?
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm that this application has been approved, subject to the conditions detailed in the report. Thank you.
The item 12 on the agenda, formation and access on... 11, sorry. Number 11, formation and access onto the B727 at Senwick Woods, west side of Kirkcudbright Bay, Kirkcudbright, application number 15/B/2/0317. This one. And we've got David speaking for this one.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is a site which is onto the B727 between Kirkcudbright and Borg. It's about 140 metres south of the mill of Senwick. And as you can see, the coloured area on down the centre of the plan there is Senwick Woods. The next slide just about shows where the access would be. So this is up at the northern end of it. And the actual application site is this little patch here. It's probably worth just giving some background that forestry and forestry extraction is not development in terms of the Planning Act, so it doesn't come under planning control. Similarly, to form an access road for forestry purposes is a permitted development. It doesn't require a grant of planning permission, although the applicants, as of the last year, have had to put in what's called a determination of prior approval, which is basically just a notification to the council of the intended route. And a DPA, as these are known, was submitted and cleared in December 2015 for a 1.1 kilometre track for the forestry. So that's the extent to which the planning authority can look at the forestry issues. The actual application is for the access itself, which is the only thing that requires a grant of planning permission. So it's forming a new access onto a trunk or classified road is the only issue that we can look at. So if it has a safe location and proper geometry, these are the only planning issues that we can consider. We can't therefore look at the usage, in other words, whether or not it's going to be used for forestry, farming, or anything else. So this is a photo here which shows the actual proposed geometry of the access. And a few photos show where it is. It's basically going to be using half of an existing field gate. And that's site looking down towards from the north. So you can see the gate again. It's a hedge which runs along there. Looking northwards from the south, you've got the existing field gate and part of the hedge. Unfortunately, because you can see these are two shots here for the visibility, to be able to get a proper visibility splay of 4.5 by 90 meters, some of that hedge is going to have to come out and it would be replaced along the visibility splay by a post and wire fence. So you can see from these two photos, this one and this one here again, the visibility is actually not bad. It's quite a good straight stretch of road. And for these reasons, subject to the conditions set out in the report, we are recommending approval.
Patsy?
Thank you. I was at the Community Council meeting the other night when this was brought up, because actually initially the Community Council were sort of objecting, and there was one or two objectors, and everything was all sorted out. What was really, if we could just go back to just the access, really, it's the map more than anything. It's that, yes, that one. Because the problem, the concerns is if the lorries coming out, or lorry coming out, I don't know how many it's going to be, coming out of the access turns right, it takes it over, takes it past the dune, the beach and everything else, and it takes it over a small bridge, and it can either then go on to KIRKCUDBRIGHT. This is the most direct route. If you were doing it on your sat nav, it would tell you how to get to the A75, which is where they'll be going. And it either then takes it up, if you look at your map on the front of the papers, it takes you up a track sort of called Nunmill, which is a very narrow road, or it takes you on to KIRKCUDBRIGHT, where you can't cross the main bridge in KIRKCUDBRIGHT because of the weight restrictions, so you've got to go via Twine and past the cocoa bean factory and everything else. And what they really, really wondered if we could do with the forestry roads people is do a sort of directive asking the timber lorries to turn left, which is what the gas pipeline lorries did, because although looking on your sat-nav map, it will take you slightly the longer distance to the A75, it's a better road, less conflict with other traffic, it's safer, and it just would be a better route. And I understand that we probably can't insist, but I wonder if we can do something through the forestry transport. I was given the name of somebody called James England, who deals with forestry routes and things like that, and I just wonder if we as a planning committee could ask them to look at that and suggest that they do it.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think you've kind of preempted what I was going to be saying there, which is it's very much that this is an access, and in planning terms, we can't really look at things like that. But I know the applicant was very keen to work with the Community Council, and there's been quite a lot of toing and froing in the last couple of days because he really did want to get that resolved. I think there's a willingness there to get that resolved, but no, it couldn't be done as a planning condition. But you're quite right, the South of Scotland Timber Transport Officer is the right person to be liaising with this sort of development in that regard. So I've no problem in emailing him on behalf of the committee and just requesting that he raise this directly with them. But no, you couldn't attach it as a planning condition.
Can I just questions for David?
Can I just ask on the back of that, will he get in touch with the Community Council so that they know that this is being done and being asked for? Because it's all about communication and you know what it's like.
There's nothing been decided.
and just so that they know that that is how we have to go about it. If the committee is agreeable in doing that.
Well, certainly I know the case officer was in touch with the Community Council yesterday, explaining what we could and couldn't do under planning legislation. So I will try my best, but obviously it's a planning applications committee and we can't control all that side of things. But hopefully the relevant parties will be in touch.
Still on points of clarification for David. Is this,
Yes, it's just the loss of the hedge, which seems to me a bit of a pity. And is there going to be a post and rail? Can I just look at the plan? Yeah, it's the next one. And then the plan. How much are we going to lose? And can we not ask them to reinstate a small amount of hedge? I see no reason why we can't ask them to reinstate a little bit of hedge.
In terms of how much would be lost, it really depends how much of that falls within the 4.5 by 90 metre visibility splay. So it's going to be absolutely no more than 90 metres along there. It's going to be less than that in reality. Ken might be able to advise.
Thanks, Chair. The hedge could be reduced to 1 metre in height and maintained at that level, and then less of it would have to come out. But there will be some that will need to come out when they're forming the bell mouth. So there will be alterations at the access itself, but they could retain more of the hedge with a suitable management regime of the hedge, keeping it to below, to 1 metre and no more. That difficult to enforce, though. That's the only problem with that.
point of clarification, Ronnie? Right. Right, Ronnie.
Yeah, I was just going to make that point. I mean, that hedge looks about 3 foot, or the gate maybe 3 foot, 4 foot, I don't know. But a lorry, an articulated lorry would sit well above that, so they would see. So that's one reason the lorries would see what's coming. It's the other way around, if the cars would see the lorry, but I'm sure they would.
David.
Yeah, Chair, just to be clear on that, if members look at condition 6, which is recommended on page 98, that's not requiring the hedge to be removed. It's really just requiring that there should be nothing exceeding 1 metre in height in that visibility area. So we have no problem with the hedge being retained. It will need to be removed to actually give the width to get into it, which is required by the other condition. But beyond that, beyond that limited area, which is going to be required to actually form the bell mouth, then yeah, if it's kept to 1 metre in height, that's absolutely fine.
Right. No more points of clarification. We'll just go. We're now in session. Members, in your hands. Archie.
Go with the recommendation with that condition.
Right. Agreed. Right. With the conditions, have you got that?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to confirm that this application has been approved, subject to the conditions detailed in the report, and also the additional in relation to the hedge put forward by Councillor Maitland, and a directive for the planning to contact, an instruction for planning to contact forestry representation related to the Community Council.
Gillian, we're now at item 12, the installation of an ATM machine to front elevation at 30 North Main Street, Wigtown, Newton Stewart. Application, there's a full plan and a permission, and B, a listed building consent. Application A, 15/P/1/0288. And the listed building consent is 15/P/1/0289. And we've got Iona Brooke speaking to this one, and we welcome Iona along to the Plan Committee. Are you ready, Iona?
Thank you, Chair. The application relates to commercial premises in North Main Street, Wigtown. The building is currently occupied by the cooperative grocery chain, and that is an image of the existing elevation. It is a Category C listed building that lies within the conservation area of Wigtown. It is proposed to alter the existing window aperture that you can see there by installing an ATM machine within the aperture. This is how the building looks at present, and this is a wider view of the streetscape looking northeast and a further image looking southwest. The ATM itself would not damage the historic fabric of the building, being
positioned within the existing window aperture, and it would neither destroy or damage the it would neither destroy or damage the further conservation area, and it's recommended that both planning permission and listed building consent would be approved.
No speakers, members, Jim?
There is a suggestion in the objection that there is an over-provision of ATMs. It transpired over the Christmas holiday that for several days both of the existing ATMs were actually out of commission.
Where was Louis McGuffey then?
Members, we agree to this application. Any other questions? Agreed. That's fine.
Just to confirm for item 12 that the application for full planning permission and listed building consent has been approved unconditionally. Thank you.
Going to item 13 on the agenda. It's the formation of new access at land approximately 350 metres southeast from the road junction of the C27W and the C26W flow of ELRIG Port William. The application number is 15/P/1/0241. I'm speaking for this one. Is Iona again?
Thank you, Chair. We have this application which relates to the improvement of an existing access, which is approximately 350 metres southeast from the road junction of the C27 West and the C26 West at Lockhead. This sits approximately 3.5 miles north-northwest of Port William. There is, you can see there just in where the red is shown, there is where the application site is, and this is a bank of forestry here. The application site is looking to be improved to facilitate timber extraction from the site. Here's just a bit more detail. This is the site at present. There is an existing field access which is currently used for light forestry vehicles and agricultural purposes, and this field access will be relocated 25 metres back from where it is currently positioned, with a new access just being taken to the left of that there. This is the view from the actual site with looking southeast, and this is the view of the actual where the lorries will leave, exit the site and they will head southeast as soon as they exit the property. That's proposed from the proposed access looking northwest. The arrow shows where the access would be. That's just further back from the road looking northwest, and the arrow just highlights where the access would be, so you can see it's quite a straight piece of road. And again, that's just looking in the opposite direction, looking southeast. As Mr. Sutty had previously mentioned, the main consideration when assessing such a proposal is the design of the improved access and its suitability in terms of its locality and the road safety. If the Roads Council roads officers have no objections subject to conditions, and it's therefore recommended that this application be approved subject to appropriate conditions.
Members, points of clarification? None? Fine. It's got 3 minutes and I'll let you know 30 seconds to go.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. First, can I thank you for allowing me to address the committee. My reasons for calling in this application are that the application states that timber must exit onto the C27 and move east. Having examined the application and the requirement for the vehicles to turn east onto the 27, this means that timber vehicles will travel along the C27 to the village of Morecambe, turn right onto the C4, which then travels to Port William, from where they will again have to turn right onto the 747 to Glenluce and thereafter onto the A75, presumably to travel east towards Dumfries. The C27 is little more than a single track road with no passing places, which is already in a bad state of repair. I have submitted over several months several EMES inquiries regarding the state of the repair of the road on the C27 that would be travelled by the timber transport vehicles, which have yet not been dealt with to my satisfaction. In my opinion, neither the state of repair of the road nor the width of the C27 is suitable to deal with vehicles transporting timber. At the end of the C27, HGVs will face a sharp right turn onto the C4, within Morecambe Village. Although the C4 is a little wider than the C27, it in no way could be considered a full width road and has little or no passing places. At the junction of the C4 A747 junction within Port William, there are dwelling houses at the junction and also a well-used doctor's surgery. All of these points lead not only myself but numerous local residents to have serious concerns for the road users of the C27 and the C4, and also the residents of Morecambe and Port William. Given that these vehicles will be travelling east towards Dumfries, the distance travelled by the wood transport vehicles, if this application is granted, from the site to the A775 at Newton Stewart roundabout would be approximately 30 miles, with approximately 4 miles of this being on C-class single-track roads with no passing places. I am well aware that another application for an access route into the same area of forestry and to exit onto the C26 and thereafter the B7005 was previously submitted by the applicants but was withdrawn following advice from officers. The advice being to resubmit the application for an exit onto the C27, which is the one being considered today. I cannot understand why such advice was given, nor can I trace any evidence supplied to support that advice. An exit onto the C26 and thereafter the 7005 would have meant that the timber transport vehicles would have required to travel approximately 13.5 miles to the Newton Stewart roundabout, with less than a mile being in C-class roads. Given the concerns over safety for other road users outlined in the application, the consequences of the residents for the villages of Morecambe and Port William, I ask that this application be refused. Once again, I thank you, Chair, and the committee for allowing me to speak.
Thanks, Jim. Any member? You've got to leave the room now, Jim. We're now in session.
When I got such a thing as a map of that area, have we to show the roads that Jim was talking about?
It's not in the plan application, David.
No, I appreciate
No,
that,
I know,
Chair.
but it's not in the plan
Okay.
application. Archie.
Chair, understanding what's just been said by Councillor McClung, and I think it would be appropriate at this stage maybe to suggest a site visit for the two areas, the area where it is and the alternative.
Members, Ronnie?
It goes back to the, sorry. It goes back to the previous application where Mr. City read out that there's very little within our remit that we can specify if it's timber extraction. Is that still relevant to this one?
David?
Yes, entirely. The whole issue of forestry and forestry extraction falls out with planning control because it is not development. So really all the planning application committee can look at is, if Iona can move to the next slide, is really the one back from that, is that geometry that you're seeing on the lower slide there. Is that an appropriate geometry? Is it safe? Is it an appropriate location to be putting an access in? But we cannot reasonably look at the actual the purpose behind it, because the forestry extraction itself is not within planning control.
Thank you. Ian?
Thanks, Chair. I fully understand what you're saying, David, in terms of it being an application for new access. But Jim's absolutely right. I'm extremely familiar with those roads back there over many years. And how the route itself is being determined is, frankly, I find very, very odd. And I would have thought that the advice from our roads officer would have been different.
Jen?
Thank you, Chair. When the original felling licence came in, which was the planning application came in May 2015, which was for an access onto the C26. As a result of that, when my team consulted the local roads engineers regarding the application, they immediately held a site meeting with the applicant, the service manager Roads West, the principal technician Roads WIGTOWN, and they discussed the routes. And at that stage, and at that point, the applicant was advised that the C26 was unsuitable. A felling licence subsequently came in, and the response to that felling licence from the team leader for planning and maintenance was that the access route should be the C27, C4 and A747, which is now the preferred route shown on the application. There was confirmation of that in September 2015. On the 22nd of September 2015, this application came in, which is the one that you're considering. In respect to the concerns of the community, I've contacted the team leader for roads planning in WIGTOWN, who's confirmed that the reasons for the choice, and if you just bear with me, I'll try to give you that information. He has explained that the C26 is laid over peat, it's poorly founded, and as a result is weak and considered unsuitable for timber haulage. It has been extensively damaged in the past, and whilst repairs have been carried out, it remains weak and susceptible to damage. If the C26 had been used, it would have taken traffic onto the B7005. The B7005 already carries a significant volume of timber traffic from closer to the Bladnoch end. Like the C26, is considered locally weak. It also has had a lot of patching and short overlays carried out as a result of the previous damage sustained by timber transport. The C27, which is the route that takes you down to Mockran and onto the C4, is considered to be more solidly founded and not so badly out of shape. Okay, notwithstanding that the above, what I've just mentioned, we acknowledge that the C27 is restricted, it has limited passing opportunities, and this proposal will increase some HGV movements on that road. The applicants indicated it will operate a one vehicle in, one vehicle out regime, which will minimise the likelihood of timber HGVs meeting each other. I think part of the difficulty we have in that area is that 30 years ago, there were lots of grants for planting timber, and lots of landowners availed themselves of them without any great thought to how that timber was going to be extracted when it came to harvesting. And we've got quite a bit of timber in an area where we've got a quite restricted road network. That road network has suffered quite badly in the past. And the advice that I've been given is that the route that they have chosen is the most appropriate. The intention, from our point of view, from a roads point of view, is to always get timber from site to a suitable haulage route by the shortest possible means. Now, in this particular case, the preferred route is 5.6 metres from the A747. The traffic, or the haulage traffic, would have to go west almost to Glenluce and pick up the A75 then. That's a total route of 25 kilometres. If they had used the C26 and the B7005 to Bladnoch, it would get you onto an A road in about 12 or 13 kilometres, as noted earlier. But the road network is not so fit for purpose. And that's the reason why circuitous route is being imposed upon the applicant.
Did you mean 5.6 kilometres there, not 5.6 metres? That is metres he said, Ken. Yeah.
Well, listening to Ken, Chair, maybe in fact there was rather a lot of consideration given as to how you're going to get the timber out come harvesting time. Maybe on the basis that, you know, the mugs call the council taxpayers would fund it, you know, and making good the damage to the road network. I would, it's there, it's obviously got to be taken out, but at the end of the day, I go back to the point that Archie made. I think it would be worthwhile having a visit here, a site visit here. And if you can use the 7005 chair to get to the location of the site, that would let you kill two birds with one stone. Technically, I know we can't do that today because that's not part of within the application. But when all's said and done, I think, you know, it's important. None of these roads are ideal, and I'd be the first to admit that. But as I say, the 7005, you know, I don't think, quite frankly, is as bad as what's been painted. So my view would be, consider a site visit, go up the 7005 from Bladnoch and finish up there, as Archie said, and take it from there. And then we can see it firsthand, even though technically the 7005 is not part of this application. Because quite frankly, Chair, I would have no compunction at the appropriate time. I would hope we would do that, and if we're not satisfied, I think the answer perhaps is to refuse the application for planning consent.
Elaine?
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm at this stage of proceedings that we do have a motion put forward by Councillor Dryborough, seconded by Councillor Geddes, to undertake a site visit. We've still to hear people, I realise that, but just to confirm that there is a motion on the table at the moment.
Jim?
I propose we don't. I can't envisage what a site visit would do, because we're not here to assess the roads. We're here to assess an application that's been made for access onto a public road that we've no control over what traffic flows on a day-by-day basis. And there may be an issue in the future to get a timber transportation route manager about road upgrades, laybys, etc. That's not for today. We have a plan application that's very explicit. It's nothing to do with the road network. And I can't see for the world of me what a site visit would achieve in looking at an opening into a field, because that's the extent of the application here today.
Thank you, Chair. We have a motion put forward by Councillor Dryborough, seconded by Councillor Geddes, to undertake a site visit. And we have an amendment put forward by Councillor Dempster, seconded by Councillor Gilroy, to determine the application today. Councillor Martin? Councillor Dempster?
Amendment.
Councillor Dick?
The motion.
Councillor Dryborough?
Motion.
Councillor Ferguson?
Motion.
Councillor Geddes?
Motion.
Councillor Gilroy? Councillor McGregor?
Amendment.
Councillor McCautry? Councillor McComb?
Motion.
Councillor McKee?
Amendment.
Councillor Ogilvie?
Amendment.
Councillor Thompson?
Motion.
And Councillor Witts?
Motion.
With eight votes to the motion and 6 to the amendment, a site visit will take place for this application. Thank you.
Yeah. Announce it? You have announced it. We go to item 14 on the agenda, the residential development comprising 3 dwelling houses at South Cliff, Portpatrick. Reference number 15/B/1/0248. And we've got Bill Murray speaking on this one. Whenever ready, Bill.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As you say, this is an application for planning permission in principle for residential development comprising 3 houses adjacent to the settlement boundary of Portpatrick. I'll just run you through the slides to show you the site. That's the site location in red down at the bottom of that image on the southeast, well, the southern point of Portpatrick in that view. That's the site location showing the defined settlement boundary of Portpatrick as it now is in the current local development plan. Similar with also the conservation area overlaid. You'll see in this case that the conservation area extends beyond the settlement boundary to the east and to the south of the site. As referenced in the report, that area of land was incorporated in the conservation area
protect the landscape setting of the village and the conservation area itself. So this is a view of the application site from the south, looking back towards Portpatrick. The development area of the site where the three houses would be on the level area between the track, the unsurfaced track you see in the left of that image, and essentially where you see that white signboard. In other words, the greener area there that has been levelled previously. That's a similar view from the southwest corner of the site. This is a view along the boundary of the site from the southwestern corner. What you're actually looking along there is the former railway line, the hedge on the left, and then the railway line is the greener area on the right, and then you see the unsurfaced track that I mentioned in an earlier slide. The former railway line embankment is now the defined settlement boundary of Portpatrick. This is a view looking into the application site from the partly formed access, looking from the north. The track in the centre there is the unsurfaced access track to the site. And again, you can see where the development area is by reference to the white signboard just off centre to the right in that view. This is a view up that track I've just mentioned. Notice that the development site on the left here, the houses would sit above that road. To the right of that track again is the former railway embankment. This is a view from within the site at the partly formed access, looking out onto, well, I almost said the public road, but it's a strange situation there that actual section of road is not public road. The public road actually starts further down the hill. This is a view from the existing road looking back into the site. And this is a view from the access again, looking along the former railway line boundary. And again, I would highlight that that is the settlement boundary of Portpatrick. So the land to the left in that image where the application site is out with the settlement boundary. This is a view looking over the site back towards Portpatrick itself, looking from the southeast. And a similar view, oh sorry, this is, in terms of planning history, just for comparison purposes, these last few slides are from the times of the earlier applications. So this was the application site as it was in September 2005. And again, 2005, looking towards Portpatrick. And this was where the access now is. You'll note from the planning history in the report that there was a former bridge there on the former railway line, and planning permission and conservation area consent was granted for removal of that railway bridge. So that had been removed by that time. This is 2003, as the site was at the time of the first application. You can see that no works at all have been done at that time. And again, that's the site in 2003 from High Point looking back over towards Portpatrick. And again, 2003, showing the whole application site. These are the submitted plans. That's the site location plan and topographical survey. And that's an indicative proposed plot layout and indicative elevations. So key considerations for members here are, in terms of planning history, there was originally a planning permission in principle granted for 2 dwelling houses in 2003. No further applications were submitted for reserved matters at that time, so that permission lapsed. A subsequent permission was submitted and approved in 2005 for 3 houses at that time. The key point to note in terms of those 2 previous permissions was that at those times, the 2003 and 2005 applications, the application site was within the settlement boundary of Portpatrick, and therefore it was in accordance with the development plan as it was at that time. In 2014, as you know, the new local development plan was adopted. under the new local development plan, the site is no longer within the settlement boundary. So therefore, this application has to be considered under housing in the countryside policies, or indeed the new policy we have now for housing immediately out with settlement boundaries, and that those two policies are analysed in the report. The other key point to note is that the most recent permission in 2005 was planning permission in principle. No further applications were submitted for the matters reserved for later approval in that permission. And it's important to realise that a planning permission in principle does not in itself authorise any operational development. So the question of works having started on the site already and when those had started in terms of whether or not the planning permission was secured is not an issue in this case, because the planning permission in principle did not authorise any works in any event. So the recommendation is to refuse for the reasons stated.
Members? Yeah.
Two questions, Billy. First, if you flick back to the image that's a road, public road, that's not a public road. Hi, back again, please. No, no. I'm wondering, there was one that showed a view to the left as I was looking at it on that not public road. Continue on there. Is there a right and approach, and it's for Ken, that's why I was looking to see if it's still there. Is the visibility adequate coming out that junction onto that particular road? Because the C roads officers have no objection. And the other question is, are there alternative sites that, that's the one I was looking for. Are there alternative sites within the settlement boundary that could be developed?
In terms of the second question first, if you wouldn't mind, yes, there are. The report is quite clear that in considering the policy H4 on housing development immediately outside settlement boundaries, that policy only comes into play if there is an identified shortfall in housing land provision in the housing market area. As things stand at the moment, paragraph 4.9 is the one that applies. As things stand at the moment, there's an allocation of 190 units up until 2024 in Portpatrick, and that's on 1, 2, 3, on 4 separate sites. So advice is that there's a more than adequate housing land supply in Portpatrick at the moment. In terms of visibility, I'm confident that appropriate visibility to exit and enter the proposed application site could be achieved in both directions.
Thanks, Billy.
Any other member points of clarification? Andy?
Thanks. Through you, Chair, Billy, going back to planning history, way back to 2005, so there's planning permission, or the equivalent in any planning, outline plan permission, then when did that cease? When did that stop?
An outline planning permission requires further applications within 3 years, and if they are not submitted, it lapses. So further application was not submitted in relation to the 2003 permission, so it would lapse 3 years after the date of the decision. Sorry, Chair, I didn't quite catch that question.
David? Sorry, Bill was going to go there.
David's going to take that.
Yes, I mean, the legislation changed in 2009, where it was renamed from outline planning permission to planning permission principle, but the same basic part of the Act, Section 39, I think, remains, that you had 3 years in which you had to submit the what were called reserve matters.
Jim?
Thanks, Chair. Where did the former Portpatrick railway station sit in relation to this site, Billy?
Chair, I'm embarrassed to say I don't know where Portpatrick railway station was. It must have been before my time, Councillor.
Chair, the reason I'm asking is, were there sidings here as well as a single track?
Again, Chair, I can't answer that question. I don't have that information.
Just a point of clarification, Ronnie, we're not in session yet. Right. Stephen, no.
Just a quick clarification. It's relating to the former railway as well, and it's just actually about what constitutes brownfield and greenfield, etc. But if it was a former railway with associated workings and these were removed since 2004, etc., what's the classification of this site? I know it describes it as sort of being grassland, but is it brownfield or is it just grassland or what?
Chair, I think the question of brownfield site is also covered in detail in the report. And paragraph 4.7, I discussed whether or not it's brownfield then. First of all, railway line is previously developed land. It's important to note here that the railway track only forms a very small part of the site in the first instance. So there's only the width of the railway line. The proposed housing development does not actually overlap what was the former railway line. So that's the first point to note. Just because it's been previously developed in policy terms, yes, there is an element of brownfield because it's previously developed land. But that fact in itself, in terms of council planning policies, does not justify an approval. There are steps to go beyond that. It's only where that brownfield land, if it's accepted as brownfield land, it's only where that is having a serious detrimental effect on visual amenity or general amenity, or is contaminated, that policy would support its redevelopment. And the policy analysis in the report concludes that that's not the case here.
Another question, members, we're now in session. Archie?
Go with the recommendation, Chair.
Alistair?
I would agree with that, Chair. As far as I'm concerned, the case officer's report sets out clearly and comprehensively the salient points, and it deals with these satisfactorily, as far as I'm concerned. I have no compunction whatsoever in supporting that chief's recommendation.
Just a point of clarification. We're looking at this submission because Councillor Dick has to come forward, and he's given some reasons which don't mean anything in themselves. I just wondered, that he's quoted the housing in the countryside policy, overarching policy, and the site-specific material considerations. But is that what we've done today? Yeah. Okay.
Go with recommendations. Not agreed.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm that this application has been refused on the grounds detailed in the report. Thank you.
Got item 15. It's the installation of CCTV system, upgrading of fire and intruder detection systems at the Robert Burns House, Burn Street, Dumfries. 15/B/3/0467. Speaking on this one is Judith Turnbull. Whenever you're ready, Judith.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, it's an application for a new CCTV system, a fire detection installation, and an intruder systems. Both the fire and the intruder systems are replacements, and the CCTV system is new. The works have been recommended by the Security Arts Council. Members may, if you've looked on IDOTS, will have noticed that there are no drawings of the works really. That's because the drawing, there's really one drawing and it's confidential for security purposes. I wondered if you want to... I wondered if you wanted me to give a copy out to everyone, or whether that might not be necessary. We'll not bother with that. Okay, moving swiftly on. This is the block plan. Burns House, located on Burns Street, is A-listed, and it's within the conservation area. Burns lived here from 1793 until his death in 1796. This is the street frontage to Burns Street, street frontage of Burns House to Burns Street. On the right-hand side is the Activity and Resource Centre. You can't see that, but you can see the close between the two properties. This is the rear elevation. The only external works in the whole proposal is the replacement of the alarm on the rear elevation just under the eaves there. And there are other works internally. I'm just going through some views. This is the parlour, which is also reception and the ticket desk area. This is the kitchen, which has a small scullery out the back. And this is the upstairs bedroom. There would be detectors, monitors, wiring and control panel and associated items throughout the whole of the interior. It's not considered that the works would detrimentally damage the character of the building, and therefore it's recommended for approval.
Members, any points of clarification?
Just one thing, because it is a listed building, and I just wonder, with the CCTV camera, is it any different when you put it on a listed building to what it's on a commercial building? Is it more
Outdoor.
is it better? You know, is it less intrusive to look at or not? It's exactly the same as you put on a chemist shop or whatever. She told you.
I'm afraid I haven't compared them. I've only looked at this application. I don't imagine that the unit itself would be much different, but I don't think it's like VLUX where you get VLUX conservation roof lights. But in this instance, I think really it's the wiring and things like that I would be more concerned about.
Okay.
Right, no other points of clarification? Members, around the session. Archie?
Go with the recommendations, Chair, but I'm fair to ask questions just in case you get killed after it.
Agreed. Gillian?
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm that this application has been approved unconditionally. Thank you.
Number 16 is an appeal decision. David, anything to say on that?
Just for noting, Chair, nothing to add.
Yeah. Item 16.
Again, this should be 17, but yes, nothing to add.
Right, I have no other further business. I thank everybody for their patience in that today. Back next month.